evening. Welcome, everyone, to the FinCom meeting. We are waiting for one member, but we do have a quorum. We have 14 members present, so we have a quorum. We'll begin our business. For citizens, other citizens in the room, just so you know, the regularly scheduled FinCom meeting is at 7 o'clock, so we'll conduct FinCom business. We'll discuss some of the articles before us, debate them as warranted, and then thereafter, estimated at 7:30, we'll begin a public hearing where members of the town and the audience are welcome to speak, relay their concerns on the articles, on the warrant before us. We're glad that you're here. We're glad that you're participating and you're going to express your point of views. So we'll certainly listen to those, and we'll go through those warrant articles, in numerical sequence to maintain some order. So having said that, let's get down to business, if we may. We have our agenda in front of us. There are several articles on the agenda. The first article on the agenda is Article 28. This is a citizen's petition, a resolution. We did take a vote on that article earlier. It was favorable action 9-1 to 2. 9-1 to 2, so that's 12 members. So some of the committee members weren't here. Others have been thinking about it. So I did hear from some committee members there may be an opportunity where they want to discuss it further. And if that's the case, we'll do so. So I'll open the floor if there's any further discussion with regard to Article 28.
I'll go. John, through you.
Yep. Maura, yep.
I wasn't here the day we voted. I was out of town. I'm sure this article is very well intentioned, but I believe it has no place at town meeting. This article is already decided unanimously by the Supreme Court in June. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Clarence Thomas agree on a constitutional matter, I don't think that it is the town of Walpole's position to open it up to debate. Hate speech has been argued many, many times and defended by the ACLU. I just don't believe it has any place in our town government. So I would vote no on that. If I had been here, I would have voted no.
Thank you, Maura.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So we have a reconsideration?
Well, there needs to be a motion for that, which... Andrew.
Yeah, I would just like to comment to clarify some, I think, misperceptions about this article that I've been hearing from residents and on social media and through email and phone calls. So what does this article do? It's a way for Walpole to publicly declare that we denounce the hateful messages of neo-Nazi and white nationalist organizations. Now, I often hear three counter arguments to this. One, that it impinges upon free speech. Two, that it doesn't belong in town meeting, it's not appropriate. And three, that it doesn't condemn all hate groups. And I just want to take a second to go over all three of those. So, Article 28 doesn't infringe on the First Amendment protections whatsoever. It doesn't imply that speech is violence. That's been put out there, that's not true. And how could it be if state and federal leaders pass similar language, nearly identical language condemning white nationalists and neo-Nazi organizations? How could it be? It's a way for us to stand as leaders in this town and condemn this. If a white nationalist organization had permits and wanted to have a rally in this town, this article does nothing to stop them. It doesn't stop their free speech. Second, a lot of people say it doesn't belong in town meeting. Now, I get that these are difficult conversations. I do. But it's incumbent upon all of us to speak out against bigotry and hate. And look at other towns who have done this. Salem, Reading, Lexington, Belmont, Arlington. If other towns have done this, I think it definitely belongs in town meeting. If the State House can do it, why not us? And lastly, and I'll stop here, people complain that it doesn't condemn all hate groups. Now, just a little context. The Southern Poverty Law Center has tracked an explosive growth in neo-Nazi and white nationalist organizations since 2000. Now, these hate groups, what do? They typically single out racial and ethnic minorities with their rhetoric and sometimes violence. Now, are there other hate groups on the left? Surely there are. Are there other, secessionist movements, other hate groups that you wouldn't classify as white nationalists and neo-Nazis? Of course there are, but their impact on society is much smaller. I'm reminded, the Gospel of Matthew, truly I tell you, just as you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. Now, who are the least of these? Any reading of history or recent events, even in this town, will tell you that racial and ethnic minorities are the least of these. To say that we condemn all bad people, I think, doesn't show good leadership.
Mr. Chairman.
Susan?
I spoke on this at the meeting at which we voted on this article, and I've since thought about it some more, and am more convinced than ever that this is something that we should do. The argument that I've heard that it doesn't condemn all hate groups made me think about a situation where someone would come across a child or someone being bullied and decide that they couldn't intercede or say anything or do anything because if I can't deal with all bullies or everyone who's being bullied, I can't deal with this situation. So I think that that argument is fails for lack of logic. You do what you can when you can. If other people want to have resolutions to deal with other kinds of hate groups or bring it on. But I think that it's important for this town, as I said before, and I'll say it again, not only to stand up for what's right at town meeting and as representatives of our town to go on record for this, but also for our children. I think that it's important for our children to understand what we stand for. And if you don't stand for the right thing and speak up when it's warranted, it may come too late. Although many of you are familiar with a poem that was written in 1939 by a Lutheran minister in Germany to the effect that, first they came for the socialists and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a socialist, and then they came for another group and they came for the Jews. I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew, and then they came for me and there was no one to speak on my behalf. So again, this is a small thing to do, but an important thing to do. It hurts no one. It helps our town, in my view. And I think, as I say, I think it's important for us to stand up and be counted as among communities who oppose hate in all forms.
Thank you, Susan. Mr. Bowen? My apologies. Dick? Mr. Nordberg.
Dan Bruce used to pick on me.
Dan's still here, by the way.
He is tonight.
All the time. He always ignored my hand.
No personal attack.
I haven't really changed my position of how I felt a little over a week ago. I gotta tell you though, I didn't realize word of mouth in this town is so quickly taken if people don't like what you say. I thought what I said was from my heart, from doing some research with my daughters, getting my own little lesson on racism here. I don't think there are many instances of any of this that I have witnessed, but I think underneath the entire program, I don't see anything, and I don't understand more about the Supreme Court ruling when all these other municipalities and states have enacted it. But I think Phil Cherhowski and the people that are trying to put this forward, I take it as an educational moment for all of us. I think it's important to become self-reflective at times and look at yourself. We are a very mixed community. I don't think there are any black teachers or teachers of color of any kind at Walpole High. I don't think the fire, police, I don't think any of these people exist in those departments. And I think we get sort of insulated from all this, and I find it that this type of resolution, I really feel help open up the issues of racism, and I think it sends a good message. The calls I got were mostly it doesn't belong at town meeting. It doesn't, it doesn't reflect the true feeling of the town. And I won't get into who the people are, but people do reach out to you when you strike a polarizing note. Personally, I'm not gonna change my vote, and I'll stand for it at town meeting. It was interesting, after all this was said and done, there was an incident at the Natick Walpole game on Friday night that I found just terribly disgusting, and it was a racial overtone issue. I think Chief Carmichael's group handled it well. I think the school department is handling it well. Probably go back to the school committee, but I think those kinds of things show me that we need to bring it more to the surface and stand behind
Thank
those
you, Jeff.
kind of resolutions. Article, I don't know. Resolution seems like the right thing.
Thank you. Mr. Bowen?
Yes. Since we first debated this and discussed it, I've thought about it even more, and frankly, I like the article even less. Partly for one of the things Ms. Lawson just said. If you don't like this and you want to have something on another hate group, bring it on. That's one of my concerns. Walpole Town Meeting has always been Walpole Town Meeting. We proudly go about our business and move on. There are town meetings in this state that the news director can send a crew to, because there'll be 37 articles having nothing to do with the town. I don't want to see us become that, become a caricature of a town meeting where everyone who wants or opposes something gets a citizen's petition, and suddenly, instead of 28 articles, we've got 38, and we're debating God knows what. Secondly, when it comes to the article itself, I do have a problem with it becoming political by choosing groups. If you are opposed to hate, be opposed to hate. When you start picking and choosing, then apparently maybe we're not against other groups. Are we not against Antifa? I see them attacking people. Are we not against other people? Do we then have to have a town meeting article on that too? Before you know it, becomes a runaway train of absurdity. I'd just like to see us do our own business. And lastly, one of the things that kind of really frosts me in it is the kind of Orwellian anti-immigrant and immigration status comments that are in there. As the son of immigrants, I'm proud of immigrants. But lately, anti-immigrant has become anti-illegal immigrant without saying it, and immigration status is a euphemism for being here illegally. And I don't want Walpole Town Meeting to say that when the ICE or other law enforcement people arrest illegal immigrants, that they're somehow xenophobic or bigoted or anything else. Let's focus on our job, and let's move on to our stuff, and let's not start calling the police or anyone else who's opposed to illegal immigration xenophobic by putting it nicely in there with the euphemisms of immigration status.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Mr. Mariani?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Tom. I didn't speak to this article when it came up the first time. I guess, in a sense, we do a pretty good job on the FinCom of keeping partisan politics and partisan discussions out of our meetings. And I do see this article as having a partisan point of view, kind of echoing what Tom just said. It picks certain groups. It picks and chooses which groups we're opposed to. And if this article wanted to include every hate group, every anarchist group, every racist group in the country, this article would be 20 pages long. Now, if you want to go in the other direction, and a group wants to boil it down, you could boil it down into one sentence. The town of Walpole is opposed to all hate groups, racist and anarchist groups, and anti-American groups if you want, and leave it there. But this article is all over the place. It picks and chooses certain groups, and yes, it has merits. A lot of it does with the language, but I think it's not appropriate to be on the town warrant for the reason that we could we could have 2 or 3 of these articles every town meeting, picking your group of the day that you're against. The other thing is, when the proponents were here, I gotta say, maybe it's me, but I felt a strong undercurrent of that, the feeling that Walpole is an unwelcoming town, a bad town, and that we have some reason to atone for something by proclaiming that we don't hate people, that we're against these groups. And I just felt it was wrong. I just thought it was a poor attitude to have against your own town, that there's something wrong with us. That's what I walked away with, feeling that there's something wrong with this town. So I abstained from this. If it was brought up for reconsideration, I would definitely vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. So, Maura, you spoke initially. I want to see if there's anyone else who wants to speak that hasn't spoken yet. And in the interest of time, I don't want to, I will allow a little more discussion, but unless, hopefully there's new points, new information. Otherwise, we can entertain any motions, but you have some.
Ally can speak
Ally?
for me.
I was not here the night that we voted on this, so I'm happy that we're discussing it again and given the opportunity. For me, I'm listening to both sides of the argument, but I would vote yes, and I would support this article. Walpole is not a very diverse town. We're slowly moving towards more diversity. But I think this is a good starting point of conversation, as Dick said, because I think there are some things going on in our school system, and have been for years. Maybe slight undertones, but they need to be addressed. I have very close family members who are of different colors, and they have certainly faced some harsh times going through an education system which is primarily white peers. So I support this article, and I'm happy tonight that we're discussing it again.
To that point, I don't think passing this will bring an influx of minorities into Walpole. Walpole, people move based on market rates. If they feel they're going to get a great education here, they'll move here and they can afford it. I don't believe this has any bearing on that. And the fact that Ms. Lawson thinks that this isn't going to affect Walpole, this will open us up to the ACLU coming in here to every single town meeting, like they did in Skokie in 1977. Well, I'm sure you know that.
I will wait till you're done, and then I will speak to that.
The Nazis wanted to hold a protest and had to go through they got the ACLU to defend them and defend their right to protest.
I'm familiar with the case.
Excuse me?
I am familiar.
Right. Maybe everybody else isn't. And through that, at the end, when they finally got their thing to protest, they never had a protest because they stopped getting the attention they craved. By creating something like this, we are trying to forbid or violently confront hate speech not only violates established American constitutional principles, those tactics are counterproductive. Prohibition or violence may even elicit sympathy and support for hateful causes. They do not give groups like Nazis if you don't give groups like Nazis the attention they crave, they can't survive. Also, this article, as everyone said, is all over. Who defines alt-right? Does Politico, CNN, who's defining alt-right? Are Nazis equal to people who defend marriage? Are Nazis equal to people who are pro-life? They're all considered alt-right. Are they all lumped in the same group? You cannot name one group or two groups and lump them all together. And as you gave an example of children. You cannot tell your child not to drink behind the high school because then they will go behind the middle school. What you have to say to children is, anything you do that you don't want to tell me is wrong. And that's just the same blanket, which is why we have a First Amendment, which is why if the State House, Charlie Baker, everybody wants to sign this, good for them. We have a Constitution, that is the presiding law, and First Amendment covers this.
I have
Do
to
you have
respond.
some new information, Susan?
Yes, because
And then I think we'll kind of
That's
start to
fine.
wrap it up
Okay.
there, so thank you.
I think it's important if you're going to discuss law that you have a background in the law.
You're correct, I don't have a background.
Okay,
in
and
law.
I do, so
That's
I can
great.
assure you.
The
I can
one
ass-
person, as point of order, the one person has the floor.
Okay.
Everyone else will listen, and there'll be no personal attacks or bickering.
The point is that this does not violate the First Amendment. This is a statement about the way this town views hate speech and hate groups. Hate hate groups can come here tomorrow and march. You're absolutely right. And this article does not prevent that and does not seek to keep those groups out. It simply says, as a town leaders, we're taking a position against those groups. We oppose the message of hate. That's what it says. We have a right to speech too. This says nothing about precluding anyone from marching or speaking. It simply does not. And furthermore, I can assure you that at the state level, it was vetted very carefully. This is virtually the same language. So you can rest assured there's no constitutional crisis here. It's a matter of how you feel about making a statement, plain and simple.
So
Thank
that
you,
would be my
Susan.
free speech too.
Thank you, Susan. Paul?
Yeah, John, thank you for you. Yeah, a couple quick comments. I mean, you know, when we first talked about this, we really talked about that first one paragraph. And then we never really talked about the rest of the stuff, like some of the stuff that, you know, Tom had brought up about, you know, the immigration and xenophobia and all this other stuff. And, you know, sure, I don't like hate. I mentioned that before. This is also a I think it's non-binding.
Right.
So, you know, to make your declarations is great, but there's no recourse. And, you know, as I said before, I mean, I think you're right. We should all be against hate. That starts at the house. I don't need a poster in the town hall or a memorandum somewhere in a school. I mean, I think we should all start from home and go from there. But, you know, I just think the way the whole thing is written, and there just seems to be, there's a lot of good points. I have no problem with it. But it's kind of lumping one with the other and saying, oh, by the way, we're going to include this, but we're not going to do that. And so, you know, I just like to see it kind of maybe reworded or redone. The intentions are great. But, you know, that being said, now we actually have a full group and everybody's here. I mean, I make a motion to reconsider the vote.
Second.
Wait a minute. Point of order? Point of order?
What's your point?
Only someone who voted in the affirmative can make the motion, which Paul
Which I did.
But since you did not vote in the affirmative, you cannot second. Someone who voted in the affirmative has to second.
Mr. Want to recognize John?
Mr. Leith.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to make a brief statement. This has nothing to do with the seconding the motion. I'm 100% behind the spirit of this. I don't know how you really can't be behind what is proposed. Everyone, I think, tonight has made some very good points. I think we are all clearly and certainly against hate of any sort, and I appreciate the concerns that led to the proposal being brought before us. The only statement that I want to make, however, is although I am personally very much in favor of what's behind this proposal, I don't see how, despite what was said at the last meeting, that there were certain financial implications to this. I really don't see this as being other than the fact we have to vote on it because it's been put before town meeting. I don't see how this really impacts the Finance Committee. I don't see it as being the kind of issue that is the kind of issue that the Finance Committee exists for. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Leith. There is a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I have a clarification. What is the difference between a resolution and an article? I can see this as a resolution. I don't think that it needs to be an article. And I'm not knowledgeable enough for the clarification of that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm not sure that we can educate that, you know, at this moment. We can get clarification on that, but it is what it is.
John, didn't legal mention that in the previous meeting that any resolution put out has to be an article?
Is that what you heard earlier
Well,
thanite?
that was my interpretation.
He's the
Yeah.
proponent, he's in the audience.
Yeah, this question about why it's being presented, why it's being, sorry, it's not open to the public yet, but we will speak. The question about why it's being presented as an article, not a resolution, I think council has advised us that anything that goes on the warrant has to be presented as an article. But we're kind of skirting the main issue here. We have this issue before us. question is whether or not to revote it, and there's a motion on the floor to reconsider the article. But there doesn't appear to be a second, so if there's no second. Ron?
Mr. Chairman, I think you're correct that to bring up something for reconsideration, you have to vote in the minority. I'm not sure, but I don't believe the person that seconds it also has to be in the majority. I'm sorry, I meant majority.
It's my understanding.
So the person that makes the motion to reconsider has to have voted in the majority. I'm not sure about the person that seconds it, though. I think that could be anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, so I'm going to rule that for now, we're going to allow it, and if it turns out that that's inappropriate, we'll all be educated. But there's been a second on the motion, so we're going to move forward. And I was the second. So we'll move forward and we'll vote on whether or not we want to reconsider the motion. So that being the motion, for all those in favor of reconsidering Article 28, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I count 7. All those all those against reconsidering Article 28, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I count 6. And all those abstaining. 1. Did we miss a vote? We have full 15.
I thought there were 8 in the beginning.
Okay. Did you?
6, 7, 14.
What'd you get for the affirmative?
7, 6, 7.
You got 7.
7, 6, 1, 6, 7, 14.
Yeah.
This is not good for the
Can we do
finance
it again?
committee.
We can do it again. All those in favor of reconsidering Article 28, please
Put your
raise
hand
your
up high.
hands high.
3, 4.
Okay, it's 8. There we go. There's the mystery. Good. So why don't you take the others?
The 6 I made.
6, okay. All those opposed, please raise your hand.
Dick, Susan,
Mara.
Ally,
Who else? Susan.
Andrew,
Mark.
Lara.
Dick. I only got 5. 1.
Dick, Mark, Susan,
Raise them up high.
Ally, Andrew, and Lara.
You got
Oh,
6?
Yes.
Okay, I'll get it from you later.
John abstained.
And you got Mr. Leith opposed, or, excuse me, abstained.
Yeah.
Still don't have the right number.
You're abstaining?
So the article moves. We are reconsidering Article 28. Is there any further debate? Mr. Bowen?
I'll make a motion for no
Wait a
action.
minute, there was a question. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'll second.
We have a second. We have a motion for no action. We have a second.
Who did the second?
Mr. Mariani. With that being said, all those in favor of no action on Article 28, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All those opposed to no action on Article 28, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Let's say Dick.
Any abstentions?
No.
Okay. It is a vote.
We got him those.
No,
Wait a minute, all right, we need the 5.
the 5.
5 again, please. Opposed?
Dick, Susan,
All
Ally.
right,
Lara.
Susan. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Andrew.
Dick, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, we have to do no action. We have to do no action. We have to do no action. 18. Okay, thank you. Let's move right along. Article 18, so we have taken a vote on Article 18. Yes, sorry.
An appointment for an open meeting starting 7:30, which is the hour.
I'm sorry?
We actually have an appointment with the general public for an open meeting at 7:30.
We do. Yep, we do.
So I'd like to move that we open the public hearing.
Second?
Second that.
All those in favor of opening the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. The public hearing is now open. Some came after I made my initial remarks. The way we'll do this is we're glad that you've come, and we're glad that you want to express your opinion and give us your point of view on the very articles that'll be on the fall warrant next week at town meeting. The articles are numbered 1 through 29. So what I'll do is we'll proceed sequentially, starting with Article 1. I'll determine whether there's anyone in the audience would like to comment on those articles. If so, raise your hand. We'll jot down your name. If there's more than one person speaking, we'll make a list, and each of you will have a chance to say what you wish on your article. Any questions? Mr. Marasky. We're going to start with Article 1. Yes. So, yes.
Did you want to go get a coffee?
So. Well, that seems odd, but you can if you would like. Yes. Thank you. Article 1 is standard language that allows any committee of the town to come before town meeting.
Right, it's very controversial. And I'm glad the moderator's sitting out back too. My comment is this. Section 2-10B of the charter indicates in part, quote, "The town meeting shall also meet annually at 7:30 p.m. on the third Monday in October to consider and act on matters of planning, zoning, subdivision control, building codes, and the adoption, amendment, or repeal of bylaws, as well as to consider and act upon such other business, including matters involving an appropriation of town meeting funds, as may properly come before the meeting." So I don't believe there's anything ambiguous about this section of the charter. I think it's perfectly clear. Historically, and by past practice, at fall annual town meetings, articles involving planning and zoning and bylaw changes have always come first. They come first because the practice was in agreement with the charter. And I believe we have been ignoring the charter. Why Articles 16 to 22 and 29 are not Articles 2 to 9 is not understandable, and it's not acceptable. So I haven't decided how I want to remedy this situation. Do I make such a motion at town meeting and let town meeting decide the sequence? Or do I wait for the Rules Committee to be appointed and present the issue to those RTM members for further study? Frankly and respectfully, in my opinion, town meeting, preferably the members of the Rules Committee, should determine the sequence of the articles on future warrants. By charter, the Rules Committee considers any subject matter which deals with the manner in which town meeting conducts its business. So I think this is well within the realm of the Rules Committee. And lastly, although not addressed by the charter, I am most disturbed by the fact that Elizabeth Barros' article is Article 29. Now, I have never met Elizabeth Barros at all until she submitted Article 29. I have seen her at planning board meetings regarding issues in her neighborhood. Not only because it is I'm disturbed not only because it is a zoning article, but also, and most importantly, Elizabeth Barros is a citizen. She's a citizen of Walpole. She is not an RTM member. She is not any elected official. She is not on any board, committee, or commission. She is just a regular person who is a wife, a mother, a voter, and a taxpayer. Rather than tell her she is last, we should tell her that she is first. Rather than to tell her to sit and wait until all the other matters are over and that she is not a priority, I believe the moderator should be required to invite her to the podium first at town meeting, give her a bouquet of flowers, and pin a corsage on her blouse. I'll pay for it. She's taken the initiative to come forward with an idea on how to protect her neighborhood, her precinct, her town, and she has the ultimate status on the warrant. So I'm gonna leave it to you to decide, to guess, what I might do next Monday. But it will come, if I do decide to rearrange articles, it'll come early. Unless I have a discussion with the moderator before then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morawski.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave Article 1.
Yes.
There is a facility reuse committee that is also preparing to make a presentation Monday under Article 1. Just wanted to make everybody on this committee aware of that.
For the building?
For the Old Town Hall / police station. They're gonna put together about a 10-15 minute presentation about where the committee stands, and at some point down the line, they'll come forward with a proposal and probably be looking for funds in the spring.
Well, that's interesting. We had a little run-through earlier. I'm not sure that was mentioned, but, okay. Let's appreciate that.
We couldn't hear that. We couldn't hear what.
Yeah. The Facility Reuse Committee for the Old Town Hall / police station is going to make a presentation under Article 1, most likely Monday night. It's about a 15-minute presentation just to update the community as to where we are in our study of the building and potential reuses, and there'll probably be a request for funding for studies and testing of the building in the spring, coming forward at the Springtown meeting.
Thank you. So thanks for pointing that out. We have microphones in front of us, but obviously the microphones are not helping the people in the room. So we'll ask everyone to please speak up and enunciate so everyone can hear what's being said here. You know.
I'd like to
yes.
address Jim Morawski for a moment regarding Article 1.
Is it personal or?
No, it's not.
Okay, all right, sure.
Mr. Morawski, my favorite buddy. You want to rearrange and have all the zoning laws, if I'm understanding you correctly, at the beginning of the warrant to be addressed at town meeting permanently, correct? My question to you is, as a member of the planning board, your committee hasn't voted for the zoning laws and changes that you want until after the warrant is in. So hypothetically, if the board, not our board, but if the rules board committee decides to go by what your request is that going to change the way your committee, and I don't mean this as you, I mean this as all of the planning board, because we have to vote, you know there's a warrant, it has to go to publishing, and the zoning board never, from the time I've been on the board, never has their vote in till after the book is sent to publishing. And we are always almost second guessing because we don't have the full page, the full background, again, as this time where you just voted the other week on all the zoning laws.
I'm not indicating or advocating my position on the sequence of articles as a planning board member. I'm advocating
as
that
an individual,
as for adherence to the town charter.
Correct.
That's not Joe Morawski's opinion.
That's the charter.
I'm just telling you what's in the charter.
Correct.
And I think there's nothing ambiguous about that whatsoever.
I agree.
That's the way we used to always do it, and for some reason, we have changed. I want to go back to the other way of doing it. In terms of the votes of the planning board, in the past, there were always recommendation at town meeting, and that's because the charter the warrant opens at a particular time, especially in the fall, sometime in August,
Yeah, it's
when
usually the
boards,
end of the
committees,
summer.
and commissions, and especially the planning board, do not have a lot of business at hand. And so in August, we start to review potential articles. By that time, the warrant is closed, and the secretary to the planning board is looking down at when is a convenient time and fitting the schedule a public hearing. So my recommendation would be to open up the warrant earlier then, if you want to get us on earlier.
Just so that we have the input from your board, so when we're making decisions, we have the full information from your board and how you have voted,
Right.
which we have been missing for years. This is not something new.
Right, so the point of order, this is good, interesting, helpful dialogue, but I think we're going to table it because most citizens are not aware of the machinations of how the town government works and the warrant articles. So it's worthy of further discussion outside of this FinCom meeting. So I'd like to get back to the people's business and go through the articles that are here that people want to talk about. But thank you, Mr. Moraski. Article 3, design of the playing field, number 2, budget adjustments. Article 3, design of the playing fields. 4, fire department ladder truck. 5, the dredging of Memorial Pond. Yep. And please, when you come forward, please state your name and whether or not you're an RTM.
Laura DeLay, RTM for Precinct 3. How do we know that it's going to cost $1 million? How many bids have we gotten for this? I haven't seen anything.
So you're right. My understanding is that the way this would work, they've set a budget. They've set a budget of $1 million, and they'll send trucks up there and fill those trucks and empty those trucks until they've spent $1 million. That's how I understand the article's working.
But how did we arrive at the 1 million? I mean, we had to have gotten quotes on this.
Sure.
I don't know if I'm misunderstanding something.
I don't know if the. Yes, Susan.
We were, there was a presentation on this article, an in-depth presentation, and there is a consultant who's been working on this project for a number of years. And there was a presentation a couple of years ago where we voted, and then town meeting voted to actually do a study. Study's been done. This individual talked with us about exactly how the project will go forward, and that firm has given us the figure of what it's likely to cost. So this is not just a number that's been pulled out of the air. It is based on this consultant who does this work all the time. So he was able to explain to us why it would cost.
Is that presentation available? Or
Yes,
you said that's
he
going to be
could have come
done?
to that meeting, but I don't know if he'll be at town meeting. There may be a presentation. I'm not sure. Probably there will be, but this is a, it's not down to the dollar and cent, but this is an individual who's does this as a livelihood. So this was his judgment of what the project would cost beginning to end.
But point of information, the entire pond is not being dredged. There's a budget set of $1 million to dredge a portion of it. And as it was explained, it's an account of $1 million, and most of it is going to be used to fill up trucks and empty those trucks. And once they spend the $1 million, they're done. Laura.
I just wanted to know that the meeting is online. It's under the Walpole Media, the entire FinCom for September 14th.
Okay.
And the group is ESS Group.
Okay.
That is a consultant.
Thank
But it's a lengthy discussion on the.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone else wish to speak on Article 5? Article 6, Stabilization Fund. Excuse me. Article 2, you missed your chance. You missed your chance. Sorry. We'll have to hear from you at town meeting.
John.
All right. Joe, if you have something salient on 2, we'll allow you to speak.
Okay, I'm looking at the town administrator's letter to RTM members dated September 29th, 2017 in support of this article. And it asks for $54,000. You're asking for $54,000 from taxation. And I saw it's also to take care of the special election. I think it's $32,000 for elections. And I guess Senator Timilty resigned on Friday, April 14th. And so we still hadn't gotten to the spring annual town meeting at that point. So there was an opportunity, even though the legislature didn't call for a special election, to maybe think about that. But I understand that maybe that's something that, you know, was sort of still up in the air. But when I see a word like unexpected, to me that is synonymous with unforeseen. So I'm thinking, why didn't this money come out of a reserve fund transfer as opposed to taxation?
Jim, would you like to address that?
Sure, Joe, just to address that, reserve fund transfer for emergency purposes only. We know about this, we can budget for it this year, so that's the reason it didn't come out. The other reason, we didn't know exactly, we knew we were likely going to have 2 elections, we didn't know when they were gonna be, so we just didn't have enough information back in April when Timothy submitted his resignation at the time. So it didn't come out of reserves because it wasn't an emergency in year, but we can budget for it and pay for it right now.
So we still then have some room in the levy limit. Is that true?
That is accurate.
How much is the total room for the levy limit?
The levy limit is maxed out. The new growth figure is likely what we'll be tipping into. We do not have a certified number on the new growth limit. The town appraiser and the board of assessors are comfortable with the amounts being recommended here.
So they don't have any problem with this 32,000, the additional 12,000, or the article pertaining to the union negotiations, which is all from taxation.
Mr. Chairman, we had actually budgeted for those union increases last year with the hope that we would have all the contracts settled prior to town meeting. So we budgeted the union amounts, that's within the budget. The only remaining contract would be the firefighter union. So we are comfortable with the amounts budgeted here.
Okay. With respect to the Board of Health budget increase, I was watching a Board of Selectmen meeting a while back, and I thought that I heard we were being asked to put money in that Board of Health budget to cover a non-union stipend, and that is not in the letter that went out to RTM members. So is that accurate? Are we covering a non-union stipend?
You were covering, Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
You were covering a shortfall in the budget that is mid-year. It's one of the contributing factors of stipend, yes, but also the contributing factors are when we had to hire a company come in to cover and do some of our inspections. We also had to fund additional personnel time to cover that shortfall. That particular person is on Family Medical Leave Act. We have an obligation under the law to cover that. I hope she comes back. I anticipate that she's going to come back to work. Yes, one of the items covered as part of that shortfall in the budget.
Okay. So to that extent, to the extent that it's covering a stipend, a non-union stipend, I looked at the personnel board bylaws and I don't see, to the best of my knowledge and belief, anything in the anything in town meetings personnel bylaws that covers stipends for non-union employees. So what I would like to know is under what authority will this stipend be paid?
I think that this is something best taken up with the personnel board, Joe, honestly. Their meetings are posted and public, as you know, is a full member. They considered it a public meeting, it was discussed along with the support of the Board of Health. I don't want to get into specifics about a person who works for the town on a specific and maintenance person.
Right, and I don't either, but what I want to make sure is that we have put the cart before the horse in this instance. It would seem to me that there should be an article on the warrant sponsored by the Personnel Board, defining a non-union stipend and indicating under what conditions a non-union stipend can be awarded. Then everyone, all employees, know the conditions by which stipends are given, and they can all, for the lack of a better word, compete for that stipend, rather than have managers go to the Personnel Board and argue for a stipend. And stipends are given at what, different amounts, different conditions. You know, so what we're looking for here is uniformity and conformance with bylaws. That's all I'm saying. I'm not arguing about the person involved or the amount of the stipend. I'm arguing that the bylaw should come first and then the stipend should be given second. As a matter of fact, I think the Personnel Board is under the obligation to any adjustments that they make between town meetings. They're under the obligation to come to the town meeting and seek the town meeting's approval of the adjustment they made between town meetings. That is in the bylaw. So, you know, we have to do some real soul searching here. Bylaws are important, conformance with laws is important. And I think, you know, that ought to come in play when we're giving stipends. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the schedule. Article 6, stabilization. Article 7, OPEB funding. Yes, Mr. Damish.
Bob Damish, Precinct 7. So I just want to confirm what I think I saw today, online. Is projected liabilities for OPEB $66 million? Is that what I saw? I think I saw it in your notes.
I believe that's an older report, and we're still waiting on an updated report to come draft form in the next couple of weeks. I believe that report is 2 years old, but that is the last estimate of that liability.
Okay, so we're looking to put $100,000 in, but it excuse me, from what I saw, it looks like we really would have to put $4 million in annually. Is that accurate?
Sounds about right. If we were to fund the liability on their recommended time frame, sounds about right. Yes, Mark.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. That $4 million number, though, also doesn't take into consideration what we're already paying for the current year's premiums on the retired employees. So we would not have to fund an additional $4 million to OPEB. We would only have to fund the difference between what our current year's premiums are and a projection of the future. So it would be closer to a $2.7 million catch-up if we were to fund the liability as required by the audit.
Thank you.
Okay, I was just trying to get some clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Any other questions on OPEB? Number 8, Medicaid transfer. 9, McKinney-Vento Act transfer. 10, parking lot fee transfers. 11, street sidewalk drainage improvements. 12, borrowing for street improvements. I'm sorry.
Joe, was that 11?
Yeah, you should just stay up to the front here.
My wife told me to get out of You came here?
Which article? Go pester him down at Town Hall. Regarding the street improvements, what are the priorities? What's like the top priority to getting your street paved around here?
Looking to get your street. Anyone? Jim?
I know the town engineer is sitting in the back of the room, but I can tell you that we have a pavement management system in place. We've had it in place for about close to 10 years now. We go through each year and rate the streets, and we try to go based on the lowest rate. However, if you're a street that may be on the scale 1 through 5, 5 being the worst, and there's also a 4 right there, and it makes economical sense to do the 4 and the 5 at the same time, we would do that. Sometimes, as you may expect, roads get moved up if we have a bad winter, but basically we use the pavement management system and sound judgment
So the paving management system would probably say that Priority Street would be a highly traveled street. Would you think? That's a fair, fair. Well, then I'm looking at the 23 streets that are gonna be paved under this pavement management street, and I looked at 19 of them. Guess what? They're cul-de-sacs, and there's like 6 and 5 and 2 houses on them. So, you know, I haven't gone out to look at these streets, but, you know, just on the surface, I'm saying 19 out of 23 streets are cul-de-sacs or dead ends. You know, I can sit here and name them off for you, but, you know, Arrowhead, 6 houses, cul-de-sac. Beth Road, 5 houses, a cul-de-sac. Butterfield, 2 houses, a cul-de-sac. Cinnamon, I don't even think there's any houses on there. It's a big rotary that leads into a condominium complex. Downing, 4 houses on a dead end. You know, Fern Drive, 10 houses on a cul-de-sac. Guernsey, 6 houses, cul-de-sac. Heather, dead end. High Plain Terrace, 3 houses. They're all cul-de-sacs with limited amount of houses on it. So I'm wondering whether or not we're ignoring some of the more highly traveled streets that would be more important, I would think. You know, so be it. I mean, we've got these streets, they've all been gone through this management plan, but, you know, we must have a big problem with cul-de-sacs. That's a comment.
Well, it's certainly a good comment. Is anyone, Jim, is anyone from the town able to address that? It does seem.
What Jim said about, I'm not sure if this mic is picking me up, so I'll try to yell. What Jim said about the way the pavement management program works is absolutely true. Every 2 years, we go out and we rate, and we get very car sick, riding every mile of every one of 126 miles of roads to give it a rating for all the distress factors. And they get a rating anywhere from 0 to 100. We normally try to do the worst first, but not always, because it sometimes costs less to fix a road that isn't in the worst shape. So we take the worst roads, we go out and ride them. And for instance, and the reason why, just to address Joe's question real quickly, the reason why a lot of those streets look like they are dead-end streets is because they are, but most of them haven't had anything done to them in the 20-odd years since they've been built. There will be an article coming up that will address Common Street, which is a major road.
But it's a good point of information. Is there any weighting or system for highly traveled roads versus dead ends, right? So you talked about the condition of the road, but is there another element of deciding based upon the use of the road?
No, the roads are rated for different distress factors, and whether they have 0 to 100% of, say, potholes, or 0 to 100% of longitudinal cracks or linear cracks, and that's what goes into the road rating.
And I would also add that 2 years ago, when we did the downtown improvements over 2 summers right in a row, we sacrificed many of these smaller roads. I'm thinking of roads maybe in your neighborhood, Joe, up in North Walpole. We just simply took them off the list, bumped them back a year. And I believe that these roads on this list were bumped back a year as a result of taking, basically, it was 2 years worth of Chapter 90 funding to do the main thoroughfare through town.
But most of these subdivision streets, Joe is right, they are small streets, but most of them have been deferred, and quite a few of them are probably bordering on anywhere from 15 to 25 to 30 years, and nothing's been done to them.
Thank you.
I was just making an observation, Mr. Chairman, because I know that if this booklet went out to all the citizens in Walpole, and if they saw the listing of streets, and if they know the streets, they probably were wondering, why isn't my street being done? And that's the only reason I brought it up. So thank you.
Thank you. Number 12, borrowing for street improvements. 13, union contract, DPW. 14, union contract firefighters. It's no action. There isn't such a contract yet? Yeah, but we, no, yeah. Okay, 15 water retained earnings, water rates. 16 zoning bylaw, age qualified. Anyone? All right, 17, again, zoning bylaw, excuse me, recreational marijuana, 17. 18, zoning article, this is the special purpose, solar, this is the solar farm. Mr.
It's
Suffolk?
been withdrawn.
Sorry?
It's been withdrawn.
Right, which, yeah, well, not by us yet, but we'll get to that.
And Moraski, oh, I'm sorry. It gets in your head.
So, just a point of information, Cliff. So we will be revisiting this article when we continue our finance committee meeting, based upon the fact that the petitioner has withdrawn the article from the warrant, but you're welcome to speak
Thank you.
to
I'm
us.
going to leave you then with some thought that
Yep.
you can bring to that segment. First of all, for those of you who are aware of it, just a couple of short weeks ago, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of Adams Farm. And conservation, preservation, and restoration are beautiful things when you get to see them. I don't know what you know about county government, but quite frankly, recently, last couple of years, they were not the friends of Walpole. They brought their OPEB liability and dumped it on Jim Johnson's desk and said, here, you guys pay for it. That's a real partner, county government and local government. The other is, they wanted to go down that street on the other side of Bubbling Brook that goes down to the Westwood line. And you need to know what the process is. If they wanted to get rid of that, the first opportunity goes to the state. The second opportunity goes to the town. So we don't get first dibs on it. And the other is, if by some miracle this thing ever passes, which it shouldn't, and the net aggregation or the pilot creates a $100,000 pool, I want serious consideration given, should that ever happen, and I'm praying that it doesn't, that go to a fund for conservation, preservation, and restoration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Kenneth Southwood, resident of Precinct 5. One thing that just crossed my mind in the discussion about this, and listening to Mr. Johnson talk about our net metering limit. We have just brought online 3 other solar fields in the town of Walpole in the past few years. It has been tabled from the county. Doesn't look like it shouldn't be passed. It doesn't look like it's going to be passed. My thoughts on, we've hit our limit, and I don't completely understand net metering. But I think our position on the reason they're here, the Norfolk Street site, which was at the Bird Dump site, the South Walpole site, and the third site. I think our position on the grid is a factor in why they chose Walpole to build these. Just a thought for the town, for members of any of the boards, is there an opportunity for us to ask the state to give us a different level of our net metering allowances because of the opportunity we have as Walpole in our position to be able to provide more of the mandated carbon-free, go on with all the adjectives and acronyms that go with it, energy that we are giving back to the state. It is mandated. I'm sure we're getting something back in the net metering process, but we obviously have an advantage over probably many other towns to be able to do this. So just putting that out there as a thought that as a community, can we go to the state and at least approach them and say, is there another level to allow us to utilize what we have better for the community?
Yeah, I'm certainly not knowledgeable in this area. Is anyone, Jim or anyone, able to address
Thank you,
some of the
Mr.
questions?
Chairman.
Thank you.
I can just tell, Ken and I did touch base earlier this week. We actually talked about the Lincoln Road landfill and why don't we explore it up there. And the reason being is essentially if we open up the Lincoln Road landfill, we literally will be opening up Pandora's box. So that's one, and we had a consultant look at it, that's the easiest way to put it. But we haven't explored more solar up there because we've been told it's capped. If you uncap it right now, you're creating some problems for yourself. But as far as the net metering, we went to about where our max is on our net metering. We hired an energy consultant when we did the 2 solar farms just about 2 years ago. And he advised us, you don't want to go over your max because you'll overcommit the town. And you'll actually be on the hook with all these energy efficiency buildings we have going up. And I know that Don Anderson is exploring more energy efficiencies in the school department. We're trying to reduce our costs. We don't want to commit ourselves to be, let's say we pay $100,000.
To balance that, we're looking to see how we can generate renewable energy so that we don't need those gas pipelines. And again, I think we, as we're building all these new buildings, I think we need to do more to look to see how can we also add more renewable energy. And if the net metering is the issue through the state regulations, then again, I strongly encourage working with the state to see how we can address those. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hassenjäger?
Hassenjäger, Precinct 1. I didn't really come here to speak or talk about solar, but I do know a little bit about it.
John, I will ask you to try to speak up because the people in the back,
Oh,
I know it's
sorry.
probably, that's just for the television.
2 things. One, as far as solar in Walpole, our water department is an extreme heavy user of energy. And I think if there's any town effort to have proprietary solar developed, it should be linked almost exclusively to the water department because there would be huge savings to the ratepayers in Walpole on an undertaking like that. An option like Norfolk County is really a zero benefit to our community. And it may be an insult because I believe the land that Norfolk County has was granted to them. I don't think, and it was granted in the faith of having agriculture and supporting the county farming, school, etc. We never intended that they would be going into the business of solar and selling commercial solar to make money for themselves. And philosophically, I object to that because I don't like to see government getting into private sector businesses and profit-generating undertakings. I think government's in too many businesses already. Ambulance businesses, recreation businesses, senior care businesses, etc. And I don't support Norfolk County on a for-profit basis on our backs getting into the solar business. And the 100,000 feet that was mentioned as the pilot agreement is really negligible. For 8 megawatts, you're talking over $600,000 of revenue there. So they're not paying their fair share. They don't pay taxes to us. It's government land. It should be zoned like all the other government land in town is passive recreation and government. For some bizarre reason, the zoning there's been a failure of our zoning, whoever, to properly zone that property. It is government property and it is improperly zoned. The zoning should be corrected, and Norfolk County should not be doing any business undertakings and enterprises in Walpole. And if Walpole wants to get in any large-scale solar, it should be done by the town with the water department to save the ratepayers in the community the best benefit possible.
So, point of information, you serve as a sewer and water commissioner. Can you provide a little more information about how the water department would utilize more solar?
Well, we can use the credits against the energy that we purchase, because we pay top fee for the energy for the plants, and they use a tremendous amount of, I stamp the bills, and it's tens and tens of thousands of dollars we pay on a regular basis for energy costs, and we could realize significant savings if we had solar credits or a proportion of net metering from solar in the community. And I don't know where the land is.
Just not to interrupt you, John, but we haven't started to realize those savings yet, because the plants just came online, specifically the Bird Machine plant. And of the savings, I know this because I looked it up today, the sewer and water department is set to receive 28% of that savings, because you represent, of the whole energy consumption of the town, you represent 28%. We are mindful of that.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and I realize all the parts of the community can, can accept an energy benefit or reduction in operating costs. And I'm just pointing out that I don't see any benefit to cooperative Norfolk County. I think it's an outlier, and we have other important things to do here. So, thank you.
Thank you. 19, zoning article with respect to parking regulations. 20, zoning article with respect to Central Business District multifamily development. 21, again, still in the zoning articles, baseline parking calculations. 22, still in the zoning, height limitations. Done with the zoning. 23, street acceptance, Chieftain Way. 24, acceptance, Civita. 25, O'Brien sewer easement. 26, Eastover Road easement. We're running out of articles, people. 27 is a citizens fiscal 2018 tax rate reduction. Okay. 28. 27.
Ron Dean, Precinct 2, town meeting member, former member of this esteemed committee. I had a couple questions given this article and in relation to your votes on Article 6 and 7, that in the past we funded Article 6, which is the stabilization, with the around to that same tune, but sometimes at more, and the OPEB at 100 million, 100,000. Now we're asking to take $1 million out of free cash to return to taxpayers, and I'm sure really not sure of the vehicle to do that either. But why would the committee take the action to do that when we know we have outstanding liabilities on those two other items?
Everything's a trade-off, and there are a number of different articles requesting expenditures for different things. Each are evaluated, on their own merits, and that's the determination and the vote that this committee took on that measure.
I believe the
Mr. Bowen?
I was going to say it's a simple thing, as was just said, and it is actually the taxpayers' money. We're taking it from them, so it's not a crazy thought to take slightly less from their wallet on occasion when you have the ability to do that. Some of those people who we're taking money from also have debts that need to be paid and things that need to be done, so.
I don't disagree with you at all there, Tom. I mean, we've done this exercise for a long time, but to underfund, not underfund, but fund those two articles at less when we're funding something at $1 million. I have the question on Article 6, and it is in reference to the timing of this, Mr. Chairman, that the vote was 7-5-1. So there were 5 people opposing it. Was it because of the dollar amount, or was it because you didn't want $200,000 going in? It still ties in with the vote of Article 27.
Right, we could solicit the different voters, but certainly some of it probably wanted a higher amount. Others who make up the 5, feel free to comment as to the nature, the rationale for
Thank
the
you,
vote
Mr. Chairman.
against.
I voted against it. Through you.
Point of information, are we talking about Article 7 or Article 27?
It appears that we've jumped back to, well, I think we've jumped back to Article 6.
Well, the articles actually tie in together, because if you find it one.
And just, just a point of information, so the alignment of the articles generally dictates our discussions. Not always, we can move things around. So these votes were taken previous to the vote on Article 27. But your point is valid. There are interrelationships with all the articles because they're all calling on limited resources. Josette, you have the
I
floor.
voted against Article 27 because I felt we were putting the town for the next fiscal period $1 million in the hole before we started out. That is the free cash is where we end up buying fire trucks, repairing schools, doing things that need to be done that we can't fit into the regular budget. And whether in the free cash, we have been deliberately, knowing full well we have these 4 buildings, almost 4 buildings by the end of the month that are under construction now without an override, that we have been setting money aside deliberately as a homeowner would do if you had to buy a big piece of washing machine or whatever. You know it's coming up, so we've been deliberately setting aside money for that, which makes us have a large amount of money right now, which we're being critiqued for because we have been conservative, the way I look at it. That's my personal feeling, and that's the only way I can speak to it. I think it's wrong. I voted against it. I think that for the approximately $100 that is going to the individual taxpayer, we can use as a town, it can be used in a better manner. And we have worked really hard to get out of a hole, and we are now, through the new administration, we're addressing things that haven't been addressed previously. And I agree wholeheartedly with your comments.
Thank you. I had one other general comment that has nothing to do with the finance committee. I've always hated the term free cash. It's a complete misnomer. And I don't understand why the state still states it's free cash, because anyone who, accounting-wise, it's not free cash. And I wish they would get rid of that terminology, because we're on camera. It confuses people significantly. When I first
what would you call it? Just curious.
Unappropriated.
Well, if it was your balance sheet, it would be your net asset. It would be your surplus, or it would be your net asset.
Surplus.
Even surplus has a misnomer, but it's your net assets. It's your potential reserves. And especially, and it's also more complicated in this environment, because you don't find out has the free cash even been certified yet, Jim?
Yes.
In August, which is early.
Yeah,
Because it's not uncommon to.
September sometimes. With the change in the DOR, some towns aren't even getting it till the fall.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, when I was chair, I believe we were lucky if we even had free cash stated by October, and usually September. So you were going into town meeting with the uncertainty in free cash, and you're putting money aside for reserve. So that just with free cash stated there, that the town does have a lot of needs, and I'm not going back in history, but when I was on the finance committee, we had a lot of needs within the town. What I saw when I went on the committee, and over the past 10 years we've tried to correct that, was there was a lot of deferred maintenance between our fields, between our buildings. We pumped in unnecessary dollars into the police station, and it came out of free cash. We were putting on roofs because the police officers had buckets beside their desk because the roofs were leaking, but we had to take that because we didn't want to. Everything was deferred. The school buildings were deferred. So many things were deferred at that time because we were not using. We weren't using the dollars. Unfortunately, this type of article would make us defer more type projects within the town. I think it's unfortunate. I think it's a timing issue. It's hard to do those type of issues within the fall town meeting. If people don't agree with the tax rate, they should make the cuts within the budgetary, and within the budget in the spring town meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you, thank you. And if I can just clarify a couple of things or add some comments. You know, so free cash, it's confusing to a lot of people, you know, but it is pretty straightforward. So it's created by either taking in more revenue than you budgeted for, or spending less than you said you were gonna spend. Or the third thing would be, you know, unforeseen windfalls, such as maybe, you know, the prison mitigation funding. But, you know, the deferred maintenance and so forth, the town currently doesn't spend all of its budgeted expenditures. So the money is there and should be budgeted and should be spent. For whatever reason, it hasn't been. So, and again, you know, the budgeting, again, it's some degree of conservatism to the budget. But again, this is $6.7 million, and that's accumulated over time after free cash has been used to fund significant portions of the police station, the fire station, the DPW building, the Council on Aging. So it's, the needs are getting addressed, and so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Susan.
Through you. I am opposed to this article for many of the reasons that Mr. Ardeen has just outlined. And I would also beg to differ with the chair, with all due respect, because the free cash allows us to go to projects that we're not sure we're going to be able to address until we know what the free cash is. Once we know, and it's, you know, we know what that pot of money is, we're able to go to a long, long, long list, and we're never able to really do more than triage and take the most, in our view, critical needs and address those. To say that there aren't many, many, many needs still on lists all over town, capital budget and elsewhere, it is just not accurate. And so I think that we need to be proactive, and we need to be in a planning mode instead of a reactive mode. And so many years the town has reacted to crisis, and frankly, when you do that, just as in your own home, if you ignore the fact that you've got stains on the ceiling that might indicate you need a new roof, and you wait until the ceiling caves in, now you're in crisis mode, you're hiring whoever can do the roofing job tomorrow, you're spending more. We've finally gotten to the point in this town, I've been on finance committee, this is my 8th year, where we're doing things in an orderly, proactive way. We're planning. We're trying to get on top of things so we're not in crisis mode. This article would take us backwards, so I am opposed to it.
Mr. Chairman, through you, just to get to your point about free cash being a misnomer, what are the better terms? Mark echoed it. I thought I heard him saying unrestricted funds. I like that term too. Another term I like, unencumbered funds. But just to echo what Sue said in relation to the chairman's comments, the analogy I like to use is a car, right? So you can have different expenses with your car. Let's say you have an oil change you know you're going to have in the future, right? You can budget for that. That's kind of similar to our capital budgeting process, just as a rough approximation. But on the other extreme, you can have like a flat tire, or kind of a, you know, your transmission brakes, an emergency expenditure you've got to do right now, otherwise it's inoperable. That's kind of like our reserve or rainy day funds, right? But there's something in between too. Say your AC breaks, right? And you can drive your car without an AC, but it's not pleasant. But it's kind of deferred maintenance that when your funds materialize, like maybe when you get a paycheck, you fix that AC. And that's what I think specific capital expenditures, capital investment being used from free cash makes sense. And if it's a medium-term capital expense, like you can't build a $100 million high school with free cash, no one's saying that. But if you have planned capital expenses that you do through the capital budgeting process, that's great, that's in the budget. But if it's something in between, like, you know, the dredging of Memorial Pond, for instance, that's a great example, I think, of using these unrestricted funds or unencumbered funds for capital investment.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is public accounting, Mr. Chairman, I think I still have the floor. But the problem with public accounting, it doesn't allow for depreciation. There's no depreciation in public accounting. All other accounting has depreciation, and that's usually the use of free cash, that you have items, equipment, buildings, or whatever, that you're just building up over the period of time. So a lot of times, if you looked at it, it's reserves, but it's also a depreciation, and you don't have that in public accounting.
Laura?
I just wanted to address the fact that we were talking about, that we do have needs in this town, and that I agree with, Ms. Lawson, that, you know, we're looking at dredging half of the pond. We have a technology study coming up through the schools. We have school buildings that we know we're gonna need to address. Not only that, but we're asking, as a parent of 2 children in the school district, I know firsthand that we asked the parents that the cultural arts programs, homework club, and technology, I know for playground equipment, cultural arts and homework club are not included in the school budget. That comes out of fundraising from the parents. So, and then in addition to all the fees that the high school students incur, the day that that is all included in the budget and not being asked additionally of the parents is a day that I will support a taxpayer being a refund back, because I think that we're not addressing all the needs that we have, and I also think we're not being proactive in planning if we give the taxpayers back the money now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Danish Precinct 7. So the town budget is a little over $100 million, looking at maybe 1%. I would hope the town could find 1% to give back to the people that are pleading for tax help. People voted for the override, voted against the overrides. I don't think they'd be too happy to hear that more money was taken from them and is being spent anyways. So just making a point there.
In regards to Precinct 3, but the petitioner for Article 27, I'll be brief because I'm going to be making my presentation.
I would ask you to speak up because of the people in the back, if you can.
That's only
sorry.
for the TV, so
Yep,
you can
yep.
stream it to that.
I'll be brief because I'll be making my presentation at town meeting on Monday night or Wednesday night. The only thing I want to address, the particular issue about planning and capital budgeting, and I would like to point out that the 3 items, the fire truck, the dredging, and the playing fields, were not on the 5-year capital budget plan for fiscal year 2018. So when we talk about planning for the future, this is almost $3 million that was not on the capital budget plan. So I think they were moved ahead because, as Jim put it, we have the money. So I just want to point that out for tonight.
Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ardeen raised a question, if it's appropriate, about Articles 6 and 7. I wonder through you if the town administrator could comment on his recommendations for those 2 articles.
Sorry, Ron, which articles?
Stabilization and OPEB.
Stabilization and OPEB.
Sure.
Mr.
The
Ardeen
thought on
mentioned.
that one, and I'll speak up for the people in the back. The thought on stabilization and OPEB. The town currently at $2.2 million is what we have in stabilization. Coincidentally, $2.2 million is what we have in OPEB. That is the most we've ever had in stabilization, I'm proud to say. And $200,000 is the most we've set aside in at least the last 5 to 7 years, possibly even more. I went back and looked in the last 3 to 5 years, we put aside about $50,000 to $100,000 in stabilization. In the last 3 years, at the fall town meeting, we put aside about $50,000. That's on top of the $300,000 that we have included as part of the ongoing budget process that's been in place for the last 3+ or so years. So we realize that our liability is right now, someone said $60 million. It's probably going to be more in the 70s when the actuarial study comes out. But we're trying to get there. We're making an effort. And we were on the call today with the bond rating company, and they didn't give us any points for having it, for having money in the OPEB account, but they certainly didn't take any points away from us for having it. They were happy to see that we're doing something, a token, and they made the comment about our free cash. They said, your free cash is healthy. Where do you anticipate that next year? I didn't get into the logistics of Article 27 because, quite honestly, I don't know if it's going to get voted up or voted down. But I can tell you that reduced free cash amount next year is definitely 100% going to impact our reserve ratio, and that's what the auditing and Standard & Poor's looks at is what's in your reserve ratio? How much do you have in stabilization? How much do you have in free cash? And for us to have $6.6 million, that may sound good or bad to some people. To them, they just said, oh, it's a decrease from last year. You were at $7.4 million. You likely won't get an increase in your bond rating, but we probably won't give you a decrease in that rating. So ultimately, Walpole is a AA+2. That's the second highest below us, AAA. I'd like to see us get there someday, but I know that with this vote, a yes on this particular matter, we won't get there next year, that's for sure.
Edit, Ron?
No, I just want to mention about free cash, or I think a better term is excess taxation, I guess, or excess funds. I agree with that terminology. It's $6 million this year. Past few years, it's been at least in the $3 to $4 million range. And yes, that money is needed for projects that we take up that are badly needed to be done. We also tax our citizens to 100% of the levy limit or available funds that are out there. So I guess part of the reasoning for this article is, when is enough enough? When are the taxpayers due back some money for their roofs that they need fixed and basements that are leaking also? So I think there's a balance here where, yes, we could tax people to the limit every year and have excess money every year, but I think there has to be some restraint, and I think that was the spirit of this article.
Thank you, Ron.
To you, Mr. Chairman. This is directed for the town administrator. Jim, can you go over the kind of the process by which you determine what you're going to assess taxes at? You know, are we going to go to the full 2.5%? Are we going to go 2%, 1.5%? When is that done? When's the timing?
Well, Mr. Chairman, for you. The time to have that discussion, and I think I've talked to the chairman about this, I've talked to some members of the Board of Selectmen about this. The time to have that discussion is likely November, November, December at the latest. Because that's when I work with Jody and Marilyn to set the budget, to review everything's due into the Munis, our software system. So I'm not going in blind on this one. I have to give the department head some direction. And if I was to get direction from the Board of Selectmen, you know, Jim, you've done a great job, we've been able to do all these buildings, but next year we really, what does 2% look like? What is that reduction? I can tell you this year, a 2.5% look like $1.6 million. So what does 0.5% look like off of that? Where will you be reduced? And I go in and I really probably think about and look at the obvious departments, the three major departments: police, fire, DPW. Those are our biggest departments on the town side. For me, it would be a third less than what it is for Lincoln Lynch. So using these round numbers under Article 27, next year, Lincoln Lynch would have to reduce his budget by $660,000. On the town side, $340,000. How is that going to impact him? Is he going to reduce personnel? Is he going to increase user fees? Is he going to withdraw the full-day kindergarten funds that the town meeting implemented just less than 6 months ago? So there's, I guess, dancing around your question a little bit, but the time to have that discussion is after town meeting, shortly after town meeting, because I need some direction. By doing this mid-year, it really puts us at a very tough spot, because one, we weren't prepared for it. It just came online in August. It raises a lot of questions. Not only does it take $1 million from free cash, which was likely going to go towards our capital projects, our DPW dump truck or something, but it's taking from our free cash, but it's also taking from the levy limit, the taxes or revenue that we're going to raise. So it's really a $2 million swing. You take it from here, but you're also taking from over on the revenue side. So it puts us in a very difficult and challenging spot. But if we knew from the beginning what the amount would be if it was $1 million, so if you told me last year around this time, only raise $600,000, I'd be in a lot better spot, because I would have known and told the department heads, budget correctly, make your cuts, because we would have to cut. We'd probably be looking at ensuring everything would be on the table, but because it's mid-year, it's just a tough spot to
Right.
I guess just a point of information here, if we can. So you asked about the historical process and the historical levy limit increases. I believe, you know, I've lived in Walpole about 18 years. I believe at least for the last 18 years, the town has raised the property tax to the legal limit every single year, and some years had overrides.
You are 100% correct.
Okay, and so Jim, another point of information, your comments would lead us to believe that you are evaluating whether or not to raise the limit to the 2.5% for FY19 by the comments that you just made. I would also point out that in FinCom meetings in this, in the spring during the budget process, ideas and discussions were had about the levy limit for FY18, and those comments and those discussions were quickly pushed aside and tabled as there was no appetite to consider those. So it's interesting now that we wish that we had a heads up about it a while ago, but at that time there wasn't any interest in getting a heads up.
But through you, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just but commenting on Jim's comments, I do think we've really put them in a tough bind. I'm all for saving taxpayers' money. I'm all for being very responsible. I think, I think it would be better from a planning perspective if, Jim is given that direction, in late October or November, where they can start to plan for it. And I think, to your point, in my 17 years in town, I think we've had a 2.5% plus overrides as well. But I think if that's something we want to act on, I think we need to be a little bit more vocal at the beginning so that he can plan accordingly, as opposed to kind of changing the rules after they've already.
If I can just point of, so no budget line items have been changed. For FY18, every budget line item exists as it was passed at spring town meeting. This is free cash, unrestricted funds sitting off to the side. Your choice could be to either write a check to all the taxpayers for $110, take it right out of free cash, or reduce the levy limit. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But there is no impact on the FY18 spend, capital budget or operating budget. It is a misnomer. Down the road, yes, $1 million that the town would have had, they no longer have because it's going back to the taxpayers. But all those items should be addressed in a budgeting process, long-term planning, building needs, whatever we want to spend money on. It should be debated in front of town meeting and budgeted and approved, not just grabbed out of free cash when taxpayers have been overtaxed. Ms. Rivasta.
I just have one more point to make. It does not, if we take $1 million from free cash and use it to reduce the actual levy, our levy has already been approved at Springtown meeting. Jim, am I right, for $69 million or so? Not the levy limit, the actual levy. We know, well, our levy limit and our levy for fiscal year 18 is the same. The levy limit was 69 million, and the amount to be levied was 69 million.
You are correct, yeah.
Right.
But this one will decrease next year's levy.
It does not decrease the levy limit. The levy limit is not impacted whatsoever by a reduction of the actual tax levy. The levy limit is a formula based on prior year's levy limit, levy ceiling, new growth, debt exclusion override. So, again.
That is an accurate statement, because each year the levy limit goes up, regardless of whether we take it 2%, 1%. The DOR tracks the levy limit, so it goes up each year. So that's an accurate
Right.
statement.
So when we talk about levy limits versus levy, two totally different things. $1 million taken from free cash to reduce the tax levy of $69 million. So the town still gets its $69 million to fund the budget that was approved at Springtown meeting and was appropriated. 68 million of that, if this article passes, 68 million of that will come from the taxpayer in the form of their next two tax bills for fiscal year 18. 1 million will come from free cash. And again, free cash or retained earnings or excess revenue, it's all a matter of competing interests. And when we look at the 3 articles that have been put on the warrant to purchase capital items for almost $3 million, setting aside the $1 million to be asked to be returned to the taxpayer, it's all a matter of choice. It's a matter of priority. Do you want to spend, again, I don't want to go far afield here, but one can choose to spend $500,000 on designing fields, or one could say, well, let's not spend $500,000 on designing fields and don't take that out of free cash and apply that back to the taxpayer. we're talking $4 million being requested out of free cash for 4 different reasons. 3 different capital budget items, which I would point out again, were not on the 5-year capital budget plan. They were put on the warrants outside of the capital budget plan. So all this talk about planning for, you know, the free cash is used for our capital budget items, that is true, and that's an appropriate use of free cash, as is reducing the tax levy for a year. That is also an appropriate use of free cash. What is not an appropriate use of free cash or other sort of funds like one-time funds is operational, balancing the budget. No one's asking to balance the budget with this money. So again, very simple, spend the money or give some money back to the taxpayer. It's as simple as that.
Yes.
Hi, Carrie Denizio, RTM Precinct 4. Mr. Chairman, I heard you say that taking $1 million out of free cash is the equivalent of writing every resident in town a check for $110.
Taxpayers.
The taxpayers, yes. But that would be if this were a sort of flat across the board rebate. But my understanding is that it would not be, that the rebate would be in proportion to the home value of the property owner, in which case some residents in town would receive much more than $110, and those residents who we claim to be doing this rebate for, the people who are, quote, crying for relief, would actually see far less than $110. So I question whether or not this rebate actually meets its intended goal of providing tax relief to the people who need it most, when it isn't in fact a targeted measure at all and actually gives more money to the people in town who need it the least.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's an average. The $110 was calculated as an average, so that's a good point. Thank you. Yes? Does anyone, Ms. Rogowski wants to speak, but she's spoken a few times. Would anyone else like to speak beforehand? We'll give you one last opportunity.
One last bite at the apple. I would like to address that as well. Real estate taxes are levied as at a flat rate, regardless of your wealth, and it is assessed at a flat rate or a percentage of the assessed value of your houses. So yes, it is true that your reduced tax bill would be proportionate. Everyone would get the same proportion, which is actually about 1/10 of 1%. It's a de minimis amount. When I say that hundreds, and it is true, hundreds of taxpayers are crying out for tax relief from the tax burden, we should not be judging individually one person's wealth versus another person's lack of wealth. People from all groups and all demographics and all socioeconomic groups are crying for tax relief. Yes, people on fixed incomes are it's common sense that they would be hurting more because their tax bills are rising disproportionately to their income. But there is no denying that the reduced tax bill for everyone, the dollar amount will be different for everyone, but the percentage will be the same, and that there's no way of getting around that because that's how real estate taxes are levied.
Thank you. All right, we good? 27?
I have a comment.
Yes, Andrew.
I just want to respond to Selectman Orgos's point. I think there is a way of getting around this. If there are plenty of other options for targeted tax relief. So even if you disagree with someone who says we should invest more in the schools, even if you disagree with someone that says that this is an irresponsible use of free cash, even if you're on board with giving taxpayer relief, there are better ways to do this. You could do the circuit breaker tax credit. You could do owner-occupied tax exemptions. I don't, you know what? One area I totally agree with, Selectman Augusta, is that there probably are hundreds of people in this town who are crying out for tax relief. Well, let's help them. Let's not cut a check to everyone in town in proportion to the assessed value of their home. And there's ways to do this. So that's my one response.
Thank you, Andrew. All right. That was good. All right, 28, let's move on to 28. The resolution, citizens petition resolution. Does anyone want to speak on behalf of Article 28?
Hi, my name is Kristen Kohlmeyer, and I'm the leader of the Walpole chapter of Action Together Western Norfolk County. And I wanted to speak tonight in support of Article 28.
Could you speak up with
Yes, I'll try. It
Yeah,
won't do
that's
anything.
right.
Okay, I'll try to talk a little louder. I'm a little nervous, so I wrote some things down. This is a big crowd for me. So I feel strongly that this article is important for the town of Walpole to support due to recent events that have occurred involving racism, violence, and xenophobic biases. Article 28 was based off of the joint resolution that passed in the Massachusetts House and Senate, as well as Governor Charlie Baker's proclamation. The U.S. House and Senate also passed a similar resolution that was signed by the President. Denouncing these groups has been supported by folks from both sides of the aisles and has been supported by many other towns within the Commonwealth. I feel it's important that all communities step up to join the chorus denouncing racism. I feel it's important that this is not political. It's a strong statement that proclaims that Walpole is an inclusive community for all. In essence, it's a statement of support for those who are being targeted by white nationalist and neo-Nazi groups, and acknowledges that the residents in Walpole do not support these ideologies. This article is tailored to the specific rising threat of white nationalist and neo-Nazi groups in America. I and Action Together denounce all forms of hate. We understand the article may seem limited to some, but feel the purpose of the article would be diluted if it is generalized to include all hate groups. The article is meant to address white nationalist and neo-Nazi groups that are targeting a broad range of individuals that are particularly vulnerable to violence, racism, and biases. This includes people of color, individuals that are Jewish, and folks from the LGBTQ population. The Walpole that I have come to know and love is one that is welcoming, and it is a place where I have built great friendships and a sense of community. However, I'm concerned that some members of our community, specifically folks who are targeted by these groups, may not feel as safe and secure. I feel it is the responsibility of the town to help residents feel both safe and valued, and Walpole can do this by standing against hate. I want Walpole to be a place that clearly values inclusivity and diversity, and that means offering support to those that are the most vulnerable to racism, biases, and violence. While this issue may make some uncomfortable, that does not mean that we should shy away from it. I want Walpole to be a place where the leaders work collaboratively to tackle tough issues and make our community safer for all residents. Silence in the face of hate is not what is needed right now. This is a time for us to stand up for what we believe in. We have spoken to many residents and have a list of folks that also support this article. We also have many folks here that would like to speak. So I'm asking the folks who are here in this room to support the article and stand up and say that hate has no home here. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Katia Santiago-Taylor, and I'm a resident of Walpole. So as I sit here, I heard that people are crying out for tax relief, right? That's what we just heard. Well, people are crying out for safety. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I came to the United States to go to college and grad school. And at that time when I was deciding whether I would stay here or leave, I met someone from Norwood. During the last 20 years, I have experienced multiple acts of racism. I have heard from, go back to your country, I'm a citizen. Most recently I heard you're a waste of taxpayers' money. That is what I go through. These are examples of everyday life of a person of color. We don't get to say it's just politics. This behavior follows us wherever we go. And we are attacked when we're least expecting it, even in this community. Walpole is not the community I chose. I married a kid from Norwood, and God forbid, take someone too far from Norwood, so I stay here. It just this happen. I have done as much as I can to embrace this community. And I chose to raise my children here. And I still fight with the school committee, and I still fight with everyone to make sure that my children are treated correctly. Are Walpole people welcoming? Yes, for the most part. Is there racism in Walpole? Absolutely. Every day. It happens. When I heard about Article 28, I was so excited that the town as a whole was going to say, we are a safe space. We welcome you here. We will not tolerate racism. We will not tolerate violence against ethnic and religious minorities. And my naiveness, I guess, part of me, when I heard that there was some opposition and reservation, I was completely surprised. I was like, wait, what? Why is there opposition in something so simple? It's not costing anything. It's not changing anything. So that I take as an insult. And I wrote this before I got here. And I have to say that I look around, and I'm probably one, if not the only person of color in this room. And what I heard today makes me think about if I should be here. Because every single time I choose to speak up, I worry for the safety of my children and my own safety. With the recent rise of blatant acts of violence by white supremacists and neo-Nazis, it makes me feel like the threats we people of color, people we have accents, it will continue increasing. We're at risk. My home and my community that I pay plenty of taxes for should be the one place where I should be feeling safe. I should not be scared of living in this community. We are only asking for the town of Walpole to say that we're a safe community. My entire professional life, I have dedicated to help survivors of homicide, domestic violence, and sexual abuse. So I have done plenty of research. I work with law enforcement, I work with hospitals. What research says is that bystanders have a significant impact in perpetrators of crime. When bystanders denounce violence, when they are clear and say this behavior will not be tolerated, the perpetrators will leave and they will go to a community that will stay silent and that will not hold them accountable. Is that what Walpole wants? Because what I heard today is like, you'll rather stay silent and not hold people accountable for their behavior. I just came here today to ask you not to be a silent bystander and to say we are going to keep our community safe. I'm happy to take any questions, but it has been extremely disappointing to hear what I heard from many of you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else on 28? Yes.
So Philip Zakrowski, Precinct 7, and I have to say, I am so disappointed on your vote today. I think you're missing a huge opportunity, as you just heard, for us to stand in Walpole and for you as our Finance Committee to stand and make a real statement. There's been a lot of discussion, should this be an article or a resolution? I think that really misses the point. And should the Finance Committee be looking at this? So I just want to first really explain a little more why we did an article and not a resolution, because I think it's very important for you to understand that. And we did first of all, the Finance Committee is charged by the charter to be the advisory board for the town meeting for all matters. It doesn't say what those matters are, it says all matters. So it's a very important job. And the reason we did an article is because if we did a resolution, it would have just appeared at the beginning of town meeting, and everybody would have looked at it, and maybe a lot of people might have felt uncomfortable, and it might have voted, or maybe not, but it would not have given people the chance to think about it. It would not have given the chance for there to be a debate in town, which obviously is very important that we're having. And it wouldn't give a chance for the voters, for the people who are not at town meeting to even know it even happened. So we did it as an article, but it's a resolution in an article. It's still non-binding. It doesn't call for much more than have that Walpole disavow nationalists and you know, neo-Nazi groups. But I just want to speak about a few things that came up during the discussion, reasons why people said you could not support it. And by the way, I share the same sentiment. You know, it was really surprising. You know, people seem to say, well, I'm against hate groups, but for various reasons, people can't support this particular article. And so, sure, you know, we could have said we're against all hate groups, but that would take away from the meaning of it, because what does all hate groups mean? You know, we're answering a very specific type of hate group that is prying on people of color, prying on immigrants, prying on hate against minorities. So that, and you know, and I can't speak as a minority, but as you just heard, what it means to people who are feeling very vulnerable because they stand out a little bit, or because of the hatred language they hear. So this was followed up in Charlottesville. So it was something that our state legislature, our United States legislature, and our own president felt that something should be said. And why should people say things? Why should we be saying something? Because we're leaders. And it's very important on these moral issues that leaders speak out. And it's very, you know, sometimes we look at history, and I'm not going to mention countries, but, you know, people say, well, that could never happen here. You know, and we're very naive to think that when those things happened, that they weren't so obvious that people knew that they had to stand up and make a moral statement. When those things happen in other countries, pick whatever country you want where there's violence or where there's tyranny going on. It's never so obvious when you're living through it. So we're in a way living through that today, and it is our opportunity. And I know you can't I know you can't reconsider again. I believe that's the end of the vote. So I'm not going to ask you to do that. But I just want to answer a couple more things. So one is political. Well, all things are political in some way, but this wasn't any more political than any of the other things we handle. You know, I know some mention about immigrants. You know, is this meaning that we're supporting illegal immigrants? It's mentioning immigrants because immigrants are being singled out by their race or by what country they come from or their religion. So that's an issue of violence. It's not a question of whether we're condoning illegal immigrants or not. That might be a whole other discussion that's not part of this. The whole thing about, you know, is this something that Walpole town meeting should be handling? Are we opening up the door that people will now flood town meeting with all of these resolutions that we shouldn't be handling? Well, town meeting is the purest form of democracy we have, and we should be very proud of Walpole that we have this process. So we've never seen a situation that I know of in town meeting where people have gone and done frivolous articles. This one's just as appropriate as anything else because it's looking for the quality of life. So maybe it's not in the same caliber as, you know, whether we're going to give $1 million back to taxpayers or not. But it does say, how are we going to ensure that we have a quality of life in Walpole? And for those who might not think there's a problem in Walpole or not, you know, let's just say we have an obligation to our state and our country. No matter where there's racism, no matter where there's hate, we should be speaking out. Because if we don't all do that, then we are enablers. You know, we don't want to be silent. So again, I know you probably had good reasons for those who voted no. I have to confess, I don't understand it. I would urge you, if you voted no, maybe some of these comments might make you think twice about it. So if you feel inclined at town meeting, there will be, I'm sure, a substitute motion. And if you feel inclined, you can still support it. But I do just want to end in saying these are moral issues, and I can't say how strong I feel that we all need to be speaking out. And I think this is such an opportunity for Walpole. And I don't think any of us really realized it might be quite as controversial as it was. You know, it just seemed very straightforward. If our state House and Senate, our U.S. House and Senate, and our president almost passed, and by the way, we picked almost the same language. We weren't trying to be manipulative or anything. We picked the same language because we thought, well, that's what they did, and you know, it should be somewhat non-controversial. So, thank you very much. I just want to mention close. So this is, you know, so members of the Walpole Peace and Justice Group and Action Together have been working on this very hard, and as well as many other citizens. And so, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to.
You've got
Side edition.
Sorry. I'll be quick. I'm really good at being concise. Well, most of the time. So my name is Melody Hugo. I live in Precinct 6. I'm here to speak in favor of Article 28. My husband and I decided to move to this town to raise our family. And quite frankly, we did it because it's a great town. We like this town a lot. We're very involved. What we also really like about this town is, and what drew us to it, is there's a community here. There's things that people do together. We don't all just sit in our houses. We go to the Santa Parade. We carve pumpkins and go to Bird Park. We do Walpole Day. We are joiners of things. And we're raising our 2 daughters in this community, and where they learn both at home and at school to treat other people with respect and not hate people due to race, gender, religion, sexual identity. This is a really core value of how we wanted to raise our children as parents. And we feel actually that the town shares these values. We see it all the time with all of our friends and all the people we meet in our community. Article 28, to me, just codifies that these are the same values that the town already has. I know many people feel that we don't need an article for this to be true, and I hear that, I get that. But as I turn my TV on with my 4-year-old daughter sitting next to me, and I see what's going on in Charlottesville, it makes me sad. It makes me hold her a little bit tighter. And I think that proclaiming in an article that our town will not stand for that kind of hate will not only show that our town rejects this type of hate, but that we are leading the way, and we're proudly proclaiming it. We're letting people know that this is who we are, and these are our values. And I think this kind of proclamation will only enhance the greatness of this town, and I don't see a downside to it. I have faith that this community can come together like we come together for many, many other things in this town, and we can show leadership, and we can support Article 28. Thank you so much. Was it concise enough? Was I good?
Thank you.
I tried. I talk fast. It helps.
Under 2 minutes. Yes.
Hi, my name is Willa Bandler. I live in Precinct 5. I'm not an RTM. I hadn't actually intended to speak, but just wanted to say, I mean, like, as a white person, I'm not exposed to the kind of casual hatred that a person of color would be. But as a Jew, I have to tell you, I am terrified to learn that my neighbors won't condemn actual Nazis. That's all.
Susan Naughton, I'm a RTM in Precinct 4. I'd like to speak to Article 28. One of the concerns that I keep hearing is the question of where does it stop? To quote Stephen Colbert from just the other night, somewhere. It will stop somewhere. Concern about where it's going to stop is a very poor reason not to start. This is an opportunity to target specific rising threats to our community, and I sincerely hope that our leaders will reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Megan Ahigian, RTM Precinct 1. I echo all the sentiments that were just shared, and I wanted to address the specific concern that this matter does not belong in front of town meeting or in front of the finance committee. And I just want to point out that Walpole is not a great town because of its roads and its buildings and its land. It's a great town because of its people. And so there is nothing more important that we could put in front of town meeting than a matter that affects the safety and the well-being of the people in this town. So if someone in this town's house burned down, or their sewers were backed up, or their house was flooded, we would help them. We would be there with cake and food and anything that they needed. We've got people who are going through that now in in the sense that they're under attack for who they are, things that they can't change. They fear for their safety, they fear for the well-being of their children and their development, and we need to be there for them with cake, with ice cream, with whatever they need to make them feel that they are welcomed and supported by this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, come on forward.
My name is Nancy Kingsbury, Precinct 5, and I speak in support of Article 28. I think the passage of it would speak volumes in a very positive way as to what kind of town Walpole is, and I think the failure to pass it also speaks volumes, therefore, about who we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Ellen Curran, and I'm a resident of Precinct 5. I'm Jewish too, like Willa. And my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather came to this country from Eastern Europe many, many years ago, around the turn of the century. My great-grandfather left my great-grandmother and I think 5 children and worked for 2 years to bring them out of danger to live in this country. And they bought a farm in Medway, and that's where my grandmother grew up. And my grandmother was 3 when she came here. And they were very proud to be Americans. They have American names, American values, and feel safe. I have lived here my whole life. I've felt safe my whole life, and lately I'm not feeling safe. Is that politics? I don't think so. I'm asking people to stand up and yell and say, this is not tolerated. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, very good. All right, let's move on to the last article on the warrant, number 29, which is again has to do with zoning bylaws, and it's deleting a certain section of the zoning bylaws. Does anyone want to address this article? Yes. Yep. Come on.
Okay, I've been here before, but it still is, I think it gets harder every time I stand up here. My name is Liz Barrows, and a couple things first. Joe, you couldn't have embarrassed me any more than you already did. And I am not the most eloquent speaker, and it's sad that my article has me representing it. I wish I had some of you for Article 28 to get up here and stand and speak for me, but I don't. So I just want to let everyone know. I know most of the board members.
You didn't think he sprung for
Anyhow, thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. So I just want to give a little bit of backstory to why I'm standing here right now. And some of you know, since I kind of presented the article at a previous finance committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. But I know some of you weren't here, so I wanted to just speak to it a little bit. And so that people that are watching at home know, I'm a citizen. I have not had a civic duty to participate or do anything more than vote. So when I received 3 letters this past December from my town notifying me as an abutter of a project that was being proposed behind my home, I kind of had no choice but to become involved. And fast forward to a month ago, let's say, and I was under a deadline, and I'm thinking, what can I do to have my fellow neighbors and other residents of this town not have to go through what I've gone through and my other neighbors in the last year. And so I put together, someone explained to me that I could do a citizen's petition. It had to be explained to me because I didn't know. And I went around and quickly grabbed the 10 signatures that I needed and submitted it the day that it was due. I was kind of under the gun, and I don't understand all of the bylaws, and it's unfortunate because this one particular article, which I've
found a problem with. There's many more just like it, but I am not an attorney and I'm not the building commissioner, and that's part of the problem. Most of the bylaw, there's many parts where it lends itself to interpretation of one person, and it's a problem in my opinion. But I'll speak just to my article. So mine is in section 6, C4, and there's two parts to it. Removing section 4 and section A and section B. So when I first spoke here, this has been a learning process for me, and I kind of just assumed that removing both the residential and the commercial would be a good idea. But after, I'm a reasonable person and I see the value on both sides, and this should not be a partisan issue, but sadly it seems like it is. I can see the value in not removing the B portion, which is in relation to the commercial aspect. So whether I do it or someone else, I don't know, making a motion at town meeting, but that would be my intention, is to no longer have that portion be part of my article. So I don't know how that happens, but that's not what I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to specifically the residential portion tonight. So for those of you who don't know, since I conveniently was not really notified of the process, and that I could add information into the packet that got sent to the RTMs, I just want to let them know what the article is planning to do. Section 60, section 4A is residential, and it says, except where specifically provided elsewhere, in all residential zoning districts, not more than one principal building constructed as a dwelling or so used shall be located on each lot. However, in general residence districts, this is where I live, obviously, the Board of Appeals may by special permit allow more than one principal building on a lot where the applicant has also shown that the design and placement of the buildings will be in harmony with the general character of the neighborhood, streetscape, driveways, building placement, and setbacks. So if this there's a little confusion. If this article were to be removed, it's my understanding that people can still develop put multiple buildings on one lot. It's just not through special permit. It's through a variance. So a little bit more difficult. But my issue with this is that it's kind of open season for a developer. There's no guidelines. Currently, the Zoning Board of Appeals, they get to hear the special permit, and it's not, do you fit A, B, and C? It's, do I like you? Fortunately for me, my outcome hasn't been decided, and the applicant is not very likable, in my opinion, so maybe I have something going for me. But, and I do want to also add, the applicant, the developer for the project behind my home, he has recently received an A&R, which, for those who don't know, it locks him into a 3-year zoning freeze. So regardless of what happens with this article, it will not impact me at all. So I'm not benefiting. I don't have any special interest other than helping the residents of Walpole. And so I say that I'm happy to answer any questions. I feel with Article 31, excuse me, at Springtown meeting, I thought it was a great step in the process and a start, but I don't feel that it solves the problem at hand. And I don't know what the resolution is, but I feel as though it's a clear message if there's, the building commissioner has indicated to me that there is one project that is this, that my article would affect. And I feel as though, if my article does not get passed, it's a clear message to the residents of Walpole that they're picking the interest of a select few over the many. And that message will be sent and it'll be received loud and clear by the residents of Walpole. And in terms of the consequences of, you know, removing this section, having it be a dead end in the bylaw, I've been told that there have been statements that happens in many occasions with other sections. And then there was another comment that was brought up in the planning board meeting, which I didn't get to speak until 11:30 at night. So everyone wanted to go home, so I really didn't talk like I am tonight. And it's about, well, if we remove this, it makes many properties in Walpole non-conforming. I'm not an attorney, I don't know exactly what the ramifications are of that, but I guess my feeling is that and also I might add, if you did not watch the planning board meeting, vote on this, they were all in favor of change for this issue. However, many of them voted no, or whatever the terminology is, to send it back to committee, just because they felt like it was the language that I used. They felt as though it just needed more guidance for the developer or whatever. So I think that, although that may be true, I think that the time is now. If we're going to allow one more developer to steamroll through and evade going through the other sections of our bylaw, it's fine to put multiple lots in multiple buildings on a lot. Go through subdivision control. I mean, you go through, you apply, and you have to go through site plan review and like go through the process. Why someone should be able to skirt around it, it doesn't seem right. So on that note, I will answer any questions, but that's kind of where I stand. Thank you.
Any questions for the people? Josette?
Liz, I was at that marathon till 12 till they actually did the vote. In my understanding, they voted 4-1-0 to remand it back to the committee, which my understanding, and Joe, I think if he's still here, he can clarify it, that this particular section they have had an enormous amount of issues with, that it has involved legal issues, so money's going out. It really has to be addressed from the beginning right through. I don't know what the process is. Do they do a moratorium on it to keep it in wherever it is at this point as they are working towards correcting and rewording? I don't know what their process is, but I was there to vacuum and stuff and to see what the votes were going to be, and it was till 11:45 at night till they finally finished
so
this.
I kind of knew that since it was the planning board and this is a zoning bylaw article, I didn't speak to it like I have tonight because most of them are familiar. They've seen my face. They know why I'm here.
Exactly, but you know, if Joe Morawski could come forward and kind of give, if he's still in the back there, I see him. Or whoever.
He's hiding. He's shy.
And I would be in favor of if there was like a moratorium where.
Yeah, is there Mark's there also? Okay, so what is the hypothetically, what is the process?
Hi, Sarah Khatib, Planning Board. So, as I understand it, the bylaw would just stand as is. So there would be
temporarily?
I mean, I think what we discussed at the meeting is really, I mean, this is my opinion, the best solution is to build a comprehensive section of the bylaw which deals with this case of multiple buildings per lot. To just take this section out, to me, it doesn't accomplish the goals.
Correct.
It creates, you know, a problem in the bylaw, and we aren't any further along in our goals of having, you know, clear guidance to these kind of situations. So, you know, I am totally sympathetic to the petitioner, and I've mentioned that a couple times. I understand maybe there's an issue that needs to be addressed, but just taking out this section doesn't fix that. The problem still exists, and we haven't gone anywhere into addressing that problem. We've created a situation where this section is out, but then over here it says something different. And to me, it's not responsible to do something, to make a change to the bylaw, which doesn't fix anything and creates more problems.
So remanding it back to the board, the planning board, what is that actually going to mean?
So what we could do then is maybe study the section and submit a petition at the spring town meeting, a zoning change, you know, an amendment to the bylaw.
Okay. So what are we going to be voting on? Will we even vote on this?
We will be
town
voting on it.
meeting?
Yep, we will be voting on it.
Yeah, I think the petitioner is fully,
Yeah.
fully in favor of getting your vote.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, that's my personal recommendation, that, that we do it in a smart way, that we look at the whole situation. We don't want to create, you know, she mentioned taking it out. The building inspector said, you know, if you do that, then all those lots that are multiple buildings per lot now become non-conforming. Which I would imagine those, you know, landowners would not be happy about that.
I just
and-
needed some clarification
Yeah,
as to
sure.
what it actually meant at that point. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. First of all, if those lots are then non-conforming, when you make the change, wouldn't anything that's already been approved be considered conforming?
Maybe somebody else can speak to that. I don't believe so.
No, it is.
You can't, to me,
It is.
seems to me you can't ex post facto declare something as, I'm just a little confused. So that's one question. The other question I have, and I'd like an answer to that, is
That point was brought up by the lawyer for the Siemens property.
someone's
So-
behind you raising her hand.
Okay. Not her, but another lawyer, yeah.
So-
Yeah, her colleague.
So could this individual respond to my question?
Go ahead.
Who are you?
Hi. Joanna Hilbert from Mackey and Mackey on behalf of Siemens. Yes, it would create lawfully pre-existing non-conforming lots, so they would be lawfully pre-existing, but that creates problems down the road for example, anyone who wants to do an alteration has to get a special permit. It creates problems with financing because, you know, a lot of times banks won't give you financing if you're non-conforming. It just it impacts both the commercial, on the commercial side, the commercial viability of lots, but also for residential lots. So you would literally have hundreds of lots in the town of Walpole who would have both permitting and financial.
Okay, well, I'll take you at your word, but it just doesn't seem to me that makes any sense that you would do something that's conforming and lawful, and then all of a sudden, with a magic wand, you're not. But in any event, the other question I have, which is really important for me to understand before town meeting, is it was explained to this body that by eliminating, I guess it's A, not getting into the commercial at all, that would then require a developer to go to through the process through the planning board, where they would no, you're saying no, okay, that well, this is how it was explained to us, as I understood it, that rather than having a vague approval process or vague standard with a lot of ambiguity, it would put the developer's plan before a body that would then apply a written and specific set of criteria to determine whether or not that could be approved. So are you saying that that's not the case?
It's my understanding that variance would be granted by the zoning board of appeals.
Well, is it a variance, or would it then be subject to, I thought, planning?
If the section was taken out,
yeah,
then any kind of plan to build multiple buildings per lot would need a variance. Because it's not covered in the bylaw. It wouldn't be, currently it's covered under special permit,
Mhm.
which goes through the zoning board of appeals. But if it were taken out, then it could potentially be approved by variance.
And who would approve that variance?
It's my understanding it's the special board of appeals.
Okay. All right, so that's different
not
from
the
what
planning board.
was explained to us. Thank you.
All right, so we have several people wishing to speak. First up was Mr. Trudeau, and Mr. Hasenegger, and Mr. Northbart.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
And Andrew, too.
Andrew, I'm sorry.
Yeah, at the presentation, it was that if 4A was deleted, then the default mechanism would go back to Section 5, which has setback requirements and everything else that would be required for a person to come through and do their site plan based on Section 5 if 4A was eliminated. And you're saying that's not the case?
That's not my understanding. To build more than one
Default back
building
to
per
5A.
lot?
Yeah.
That's not my understanding, no.
Well, subset.
6C4A.
6C4A, would default back to 5A.
Is that, you good? Mr. Hasenegger, do you wanna?
I think this discussion illustrates why it needs to be remanded to have full understanding, because almost no one in this room understands the zoning issues right now. It's sad, it's complex, and it's important, and it's a serious matter to meddle with the zoning regulations. Off the top, folks, state law requires us to have multifamily. You can't snob zone lots and say you can only have one house on a lot. You can't do it, okay? That's a myth. We don't want that in the community. We just have people talking about other inclusion, and we want to have different types of housing for seniors, empty nesters, low-income people, etc. So, there's so many misunderstandings in this. It's virtually unbelievable. But try to distill it down for you. The attorney made a very good point. If you want to talk about injuring people in Walpole, if this is taken out of the book, there will be hundreds of condominium owners, Swan Pond, Riverwalk, all over town, Plimpton Village, who will be non-conforming homeowners. That affects their mortgage. You try to sell your property, you can lose a sale. Purchase and sale agreement can be canceled because it's not because the property is non-compliant. Even if you don't disclose it, you can be sued if your property is non-compliant. It's a serious financial matter, more so for businesses, but also for consumers. And people don't find out to the last minute till they find out their mortgage is goofed up or their sale of their home fell through. So it's making something non-conforming through zoning is very injurious. It's very dangerous. If you took it out and left it, as this gentleman said, left the book, the zoning board already applies all the metrics and all the standards in the book. It's their book. They don't follow the Conroy stepping stone method or whatever. They use every standard in their book and they make up a dozen more. No one has to worry about the zoning board in Walpole missing anything. They turn over every stone and rock, and they're as thorough as you'll ever find. So you don't have to mistake that. But on this particular issue, buyers, homeowners, want small, units, and they want things that fit in the neighborhood. What's being promoted by the lady here is, Ms. Barrows, is just the opposite. By making her neighbor developer have one building on a lot, he's gonna build a huge apartment building like Windsor Gardens instead of a dozen small houses like hers. She may not want that, but I assure you, the other people in East Walpole want the smaller units. They don't want the big tower unit that she's promoting. So that doesn't help anyone. And ultimately, the buyers, people who are looking for homes, this is what they want. They want townhouses, they want smaller units. They don't want to live in a big Windsor Garden or a big flat type of building. So that helps no one. Far as the outcome of this, if you, well, I mean, I think the planning board did the right thing. They have to rewrite it so that they have a process. When they talk about skipping or a loophole and someone's getting away with something, that is also fraudulent. 10 years ago, we decided in this town that you didn't have to do 3 site plans. This is why businesses don't come to Walpole. This is why they don't invest in Walpole. Because we are so rigorous in our permitting and approval process, it takes years. One of the top builders in the East Coast, Mr. Marini, left Walpole after 3 years. He couldn't stand it. He couldn't get one built. He built 2 buildings in the meantime in Norway. He couldn't believe how long it took. So our town said, if you go through conservation and you have an as-of-right project in by the way, general residence zone is more than 1 house. She has a single-family house in the zone that's supposed to have more than 1. That's what people don't understand. You live in general residence is for multifamily. Okay. We decided if you go through conservation, do a complete site plan, then you go to zoning board and spend 1.5 years and do another site plan. That if you have a small as-of-right project, you don't have to do a 3rd site plan with the Walpole Planning Board. It becomes totally redundant and wasteful and uneconomic. And then plus the plans don't fit. So that was designed that way. And that only happens, some of the relief they're talking about is they skip steps when it's a small project, when it's 1, 2, or 3 units. Okay? So there is so much goofiness and misunderstandings. It would be a sin to change this right now. I think the planning board needs to do a thorough study. They were going to do a study 2 years ago on open space planning. They didn't get around to it. But they should clarify this so people can understand our zoning, make it streamlined and customer friendly and oriented to the market. People, and this lady, by the way, I mean, I do take offense. I saw you speak on television. You stood here and you said, I really don't know anything about development or real estate or any of this. I believe you're a real estate broker. So I think you know a little bit more than you're telling these people.
Point of order. This is inappropriate.
So,
inappropriate.
I think that, you know, the
So let's wrap it up, John.
Yeah, I think the study should be done, but should be done in concert with the Zoning Board of Appeals as well as the Planning Board, not just the Planning Board. I think the 2 of them should work. They have 2 separate books, and it can be worked out.
Thank you. So we're going to try and move this along. Those that haven't spoken yet are going to get a chance to speak. I believe we've. You know,
on that article?
Yes, sir.
If you don't mind? Thanks. Just for clarification purposes, Mark Romeo, Planning Board. I commend Ms. Barrows on her effort with this. I live in East Walpole. I'm just around the corner from her, so anything that would be done with this article would impact me directly. Having said that, you know, a citizen's petition is just that, and she has been absolutely unwavering in her commitment to this, so I want to commend her for that. Having said that, it's really quite simple why we sent it back to committee. We don't know what we don't know, and that's very dangerous, and we have to consider unintended consequences of this change, and that's all. I don't think anyone is at least speaking for myself, I'm not against what she's proposing, but I'm not sure I'm for it yet, because I don't understand every scenario. And that was the only reason we sent it back. We didn't send it back as a just trying to be nice to Ms. Barrows and say, okay, we'll look at it, but we're really not going to do anything. We've committed that we want to work with the zoning board in conjunction with the planning board and Ms. Barrows and find a solution that will work, that we won't be saying to ourselves 2 years from now, oh my God, what did we do? That would be a nightmare. You know, I don't know if it's as bad as Mr. Hasenjager says it will be. I don't think someone's going to put a 5-story apartment building with 16 units in it on, what's your street? Burns Ave. I mean, I don't think that's, we're not going to have a high rise there. However, until we know exactly what the consequences of this action are, we weren't prepared to move forward with it, and that was it. We weren't against her, we just wanted to make sure. So I wanted to clarify that for everyone.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, so just with respect to Andrew and Susan, so our committee is still going to address this matter when we reconvene our meeting. If you wouldn't mind.
I just do want to say something while the group is here.
Sure, yes, go right ahead. And then there is still comments
Right.
From citizens.
I think it's really, through you, Mr. Chairman, really important. I'll just speak for myself, but I would venture to guess most people around this table and also in town meeting are not rolling up our sleeves and working so hard for the purpose of making customers and developers happy. I, for one, and again, I'll just speak for myself, am very concerned about the impact on the residents we have here in Walpole. And if there is an issue that's a problem for residents who are here already and are taxpayers already, I think that we need to be responsive to that. With all due respect to Mr. Hasenjager, I hope that at town meeting you make it clear that you are a developer, because I think that it's important, as the petitioner did state, whether or not there was a conflict. I think when there is a potential conflict or an appearance of a conflict of interest, it's really important that the body you're addressing understands that issue. So I hope that you'll do that at town meeting when you speak on this issue, which I'm sure that you will. Having said that, I look forward to the presentation at town meeting, and again, commend the petitioner for working as hard as she's done to get it this far. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe.
Yes.
I do have a lot to say on this, but I'm going to wait until we talk about it. But just while the people are here, I wanted to ask 2 quick questions. One is for either Sarah or anyone on the planning board. First of all, I just want to say, again, people commended Ms. Barrows. I do too. And Joe Moraski and Jack Conwell on the planning board have been really gracious answering some questions of mine. But so my 2 quick questions, one for them, either Sarah or someone on the planning board to clarify this, and then one for the petitioner. So for the planning board, I'll start there. Whether it's, and there was just some confusion here, whether by cutting section 6C4A, we push these kind of multiple lots in the GR zone onto section 5, or whether it's a variance by the zoning board of appeals. Whatever it is, and I think that's a great reason why we should, remand this back to committee, and you voted to do so, to clarify this. But either way, am I correct in understanding that that's a higher threshold than the special permitting process under 6C4A? And if it is a higher threshold, if you can confirm that, isn't the impact of this that fewer multiple lots will be built on the GR zone?
Anyone?
It's hard to know what the impact would be. You would imagine that it would have an impact. But I stated this at the planning board meeting. Maybe it's not a popular opinion, but we have the GR zoned as general residence to be a higher dense zone.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, I think that's good. I think that's good planning. I think that's appropriate. So what the petitioner would like is to just level the playing field, she says, and just make it fair so that, a developer can come in and put multiple buildings per lot in residence A, just the same that they could do in GR. But anyway, so a variance is a higher threshold. But what I want to say about is it gonna go back to the planning board or not? What we have, from the building commissioner is a letter stating why this particular project didn't have to go through the planning board. So he outlined the sections of the bylaw and said, you know, this particular project with multiple buildings per lot, it doesn't meet this condition, this condition, this condition, or this condition, therefore it goes through the ZBA. So if the section were out, that ruling still stands. The zoning enforcement officer has already said these kind of projects, you know, go to the ZBA. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden it has to go to the planning board for site review. So that's, I think, maybe Jack and I disagree, but I think that's what Jack was trying to say in your previous hearing, that take it out, it goes to section 5, that's the planning board, we're good to go. I guess we have, you know, a disagreement of opinion there.
Gotcha. That's really helpful. And then my other second question, hopefully quick, is to the petitioner. I think I asked you this at the FinCom meeting before when you presented again. I really appreciate your effort on this. But I just so I understand it, is the motivation for this citizen petition, is it to level the playing field among different residential zones? So is your point that the GR zone is being discriminated against and that we need to have it equal against Res A, Res B, or whatever? Or is your motivation for this that there's dense housing in GR, period?
Well, it's kind of a hard question to answer. I think my thought process has been kind of fluid. It's changed and evolved as I've been asked questions throughout the process. And my first initial gut feeling was, like you said, we should level the playing field. But I understand that there's a need for limited manufacturing, or there's a need for this. We have certain needs and we need to cater to that so that as a whole the town works. However, to not have any parameters for that section, you know, if you, I guess the issue I had was the development behind my house should very well have been a subdivision, where they went in and they cut in the street and went through the proper channels. But because this is in there, it allows a builder to make more money and skirt all of that system of checks and balances.
Thank you.
So I'm not against multiple units, but that leads me into my other. This is the project as it stood somewhere in the middle. It originally started differently, and then we had conservation issues, and you couldn't build closer to the river that goes through my backyard. 12 feet apart is what he's proposing for, on average, 2,000 square foot, 2.5 story, more than 2.5 story, because the garages are at only halfway underground. Some of them are at the way it lands out. So it's 12 feet, people. 12 feet is not a lot to have a 2,000 square foot home apart from each other. So if he had come in and was reasonable and done what I imagine this originally was put in the bylaw for an appropriate development that wasn't going in at the end of a dead-end street, jamming 14 large houses onto a lot. And I want to speak to what Sarah said. And this is the problem at hand. And yes, I understand people, since nobody knows what they're talking about in terms of the bylaw. Through this whole process, you wouldn't have imagined how many times town council had to be called to write a brief about this, that, and the other thing. Part of the problem is that it's interpretation of one individual. And things were not always interpreted the way they were, the same bylaw. So now, just because we have a different building commissioner, he's able to interpret something different. But one thing I do want to point out, so you can see how ridiculous this whole problem really is. Under site plan review, to applicability, and this is why the project behind my house is not applicable. E states all uses requiring a special permit under section 5B, except for 1, 2, and 3 family residences, uses or activities that do not involve any changes to the exterior of the structure, and for those uses or activities specifically exempted from site plan review and other sections of the zoning bylaw. So the building commissioner said, oh, well, because they're single family homes, it doesn't matter that there are 14 of them, but because they're single family, he doesn't have to go through the process. So it's interpretations like that that are a major problem, and I don't know what the solution is. I'm not the one who created this document, but I think that anything short of a moratorium on this, on my article, is wrong. If everybody, Liz Dennehy, building commissioner, the planning board, the zoning board, they all say that this is terrible, this bylaw, it's failing the residents of Walpole. Why aren't we just saying, well, let's put a hold on this particular section, allowing any applications through this thing until we can, over the next 6 months, figure it out and present a new article? I don't understand. And if that's not possible to put a moratorium on or something, then couldn't you just remove it with knowing that we're going to create we'll just put it back in spring, but with the appropriate parameters. I don't know why neither of those options are on the table.
Right, so, just point of information, thank you for your passionate explanation and relaying your situation to us, and it's unfortunate. There is a little bit of, grappling for a solution here, which we're not able to do at this point. We have, we're listening to comments on the article in front of us, and later on tonight, FinCom, will be voting on this, Article 29, but we're not gonna solve the issue, which seems to be a much larger issue. So I'm getting ready to cut off debate on this because the hour is getting late and we still need to reconvene. So I'll give, yes, and really just new information or salient points, if you may, please.
Thank you. Again, Joanna Hilvert from Mackey & Mackey on behalf of Siemens. I would just like to reiterate, I'm here on behalf of a commercial client, so I'm, the residential piece aside, and I know Liz had said that, she would withdraw the commercial piece of it, but I just would like to emphasize that this has a particular impact on Siemens as well as other commercial properties in the town of Walpole, and it would impact, for Siemens, building on the interpretation thing, they have skywalks between the buildings, so it's considered one building, but a different interpretation down the road could change that and throw them into nonconformity. There's still more space on the property, not that they have plans right now to do development beyond what they're already doing, but that's a potential in the future. There's other commercial properties in Walpole, such as the Walpole Mall, that this would affect. So I would just like to express our strong opposition to the commercial piece of this article. Thank you.
Dick, you have it?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. I fully support what Mark Romeo and Sarah Katib have put forward here, and I know I'm probably not going to line up with Susan's thinking on any of this stuff, but having been on the planning board for 2 terms and filling in for a year, zoning and planning is the fabric of your community. And I really see there are some things that favor some people, maybe some that don't. But these zoning laws were written a while back. And if we just go in arbitrarily and cherry pick by project, we're gonna end up in a mess. The town, when I first joined the planning board, had a 4 or 5 month rewrite committee of 25 citizens and a chairman and a member of the planning board. And the night before the article was to go to town meeting to get the 2/3 approval, they pulled it back because there was so many different problems. One leads from one to another. I've sat in land court the last year, which I was chairman of the board, and I didn't know what the hell was going on in there. You know, we had the Copeland and Page and, you know, the Mackeys and other people involved. And I really believe we should be prudent. I tried to say this with Article 31, and I kind of got pushed aside. Joe was mad at me, but I think he's all right now. But I think it's right to go back to committee, and I think it's right to get it right.
Thank you. Small.
I was thinking of making a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Can I add one more thing?
We'll be talking about your
You've been-
articles.
I
You
think
can
you've
join
had the
us
floor
next
for
discussion.
anyone longer than anyone else here tonight. Do you really feel it's important?
We can have her visit our meeting as we talk about her article before our vote. She can re-speak if you wish at that point.
Or don't wish?
Okay.
You
You got a motion and second, so we need to go to vote.
Who seconded?
He seconded it, because that was ready to second.
Seconded.
I don't think seconds were a problem.
No.
Dick
All
seconded it?
No.
Did Dick second it?
Ron.
Ron, okay.
Do we have a second? We have a motion. All those in favor of closing the public meeting at this moment, please raise their hand. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstained? That concludes the public meeting. Thank you for attending, bearing with us, sharing your thoughts, your point of views, your passions. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
See you Monday night?
Yeah, of course, you're free to stay if you wish. You know, you just
Yeah.
can't participate.
Got a chart too.
So,
Yeah, this is the.
but we will ask you to leave quietly if you may. We're gonna continue on with our business. The hour is late. Some people, like the chairman, haven't had anything to eat, but besides.
I've got a meal bar for you. Seriously, they're really good, aren't they, Sue? You had it. They're really good.
You don't want you passing out.
It's called, I should, is it gluten free? It's called Pro Bar, it's organic.
Well, then it would be good. Thank you, sir.
I'm at the ladies' room.
I
Okay.
think they're good, but you tell me. I order them all on Amazon. I just saw. You can find them at some food
that?
stores.
All right, let's move. So, yes, I'm sure. All right, 5-minute break. 5-minute bio break.
Mark, do you have that paper?
I didn't write it up yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll re-adjourn at 10 o'clock, folks.
18.
Still better than quarter to 12.
We should be able to get those done in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I gotta.
So are you aware of any, I've heard of one person
appreciate the consideration. Yes, Mr. Bowen.
I'll make a motion to reconsider Article 18.
Second.
Who seconded?
I second. All those in favor of reconsidering Article 18, please raise your hand. It is a vote. Let's reconsider Article 18. Mr. Bowen.
You should get opposed. You should get opposed.
No action?
That's on the solar farm.
Oh, we want to refer back to committee, so we don't kill it. Refer back to committee.
It's withdrawn.
Right, so is everyone aware the sponsors have withdrawn their article? Okay.
I make a motion to refer back to committee.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of referring Article 18 back to committee, please raise your hand.
Great.
Excellent.
I don't have the back story.
We might as well keep going.
I make a motion to reconsider Article 14.
Second.
All those in favor of reconsidering Article 14, please raise your hand.
Wait a minute.
Slow down.
Who seconded?
They're like an auctioneer, Tom.
Who seconded?
Mr. Bowen.
Well, wait, we have to slow down for a second. please.
All right, who's,
We
who put
know
the
where this is
article?
going.
Who went the first?
What?
Who was the first and who was the second?
Tom
Tom made the motion.
Who was the second?
I was. You made a motion.
Oh,
To reconsider.
okay,
Yeah.
to reconsider.
And when you're ready, I'll make another motion. For,
Wait a minute, we gotta vote that.
oh, yeah.
Smoke coming out of that.
Did everybody approve of the reconsideration?
Yes, we just voted. Yes, we just voted to reconsider 14.
Okay.
Okay, so then I'll make a motion for no action for Article 14.
Second.
Susan. Any debate on the no action on Article 14? All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of no action on Article 14, firefighter contract, please raise your hand. Unanimous.
Okay. That is-
And that brings us to Article 29.
I'll make a motion for to reconsider that. I won't be as quick on the next one.
Second. We have a second. All those in favor of reconsidering Article 29, please raise your hand.
15-0 on the reconsideration.
Unanimous? Here we are. Ally.
Comment. I was also present as an RTM in the spring meeting, which we spent a lot of time in Article 31. I'm a resident of East Walpole. I was at the spring meeting when we spent a great deal of time on Article 31, and also I'm a resident of East Walpole. And I feel for Liz and what's going on, and it's obvious that there needs to be some work on those zoning laws, because the residents of East Walpole, I think the RTMs back in the spring heard from a number of local residents about what's going on, what's being proposed. Darren pointed out that GR is for multiple family homes, but if you're a resident of East Walpole, I live on a street that everyone says that's my favorite street in East Walpole. There's a character to East Walpole, and I think there needs to be a lot of work done. I'm in favor for what Liz is proposing, but I also hear the arguments against of where things are going and whether a secondary motion can be made at town meeting to eliminate the commercial piece. I think that is definitely an option, but I think the residents of East Walpole are asking for GR to be looked at and looked at seriously, because spring meeting was May and we're now here in October and we're not much better. And there's still projects that are really will hurt the character of East Walpole.
Thank you. Lee?
Yeah, through you. Is this even working?
Yeah, well, it's for the TV.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Through you, John.
Peter would like you
And
to
I'm not
go
sure who I'm directing this to, but I think it's to Liz and maybe to, are we allowed to go to Joe or anything like that?
To the committee, and sure,
Yeah.
if we need expert
Okay.
information.
I guess we heard a lot tonight about your proposal. And the proposal is a compelling proposal, but it sounds like there are bugs that need to be worked out, and so that really what needs to be done is to have some kind of moratorium while the bugs are being worked out. And so my question to you is, and maybe to Joe ultimately, is there a moratorium that can be tailored for this situation? And is someone preparing a alternate proposal to input that so that that this thing can go forward in a way that is prudent and cautious and stops this from happening while the zoning bylaw is corrected or is perfected or is made better? That's my question. Joe.
Well,
Yeah.
I listened to all the discussion, and I thought I had a solution. I don't know if it will result in another Article 31 at town meeting. So consequently, I'm kind of leery about this. But is it possible to have a moratorium? I think that would be, my personal opinion is, would it be within the scope of the article? I think it would be. It would depend on what Mr. Bruce has to say. There could also be a substitute motion that says that Part A of that section maybe only applies to those parcels built and in prior to October 16th, 2017, and that only those after, sorry, you don't get multiple parcels on a single lot. That may be a possibility, but those things are going to have to be presented to town council, and they'll probably have to go very quickly tomorrow. And in the meantime, what do you do with this? And you've heard all the issues, and this is where I was at 1 o'clock in the morning when we finally decided, and I voted along with the majority to remand it back to the planning board so that we could fix it in its entirety. There are 2,196 parcels in the GR zone. 989 of them are single-family homes. 903 are condominiums. 8 are mixed use. 120 are two-family. 24 are three-family. 9 right now are two houses on one parcel. I guess taking advantage, the beginning of taking advantage of this so-called loophole. And 1 is an accessory building. There are 5 four-families, 5 4 to 8 units, 8 over 8 units, 1 boarding house, 1 group home that's taxable, 42 vacant parcels that are taxable, 20 commercial parcels, 5 industrials, and 55 exempt properties. And most of those exempt properties are vacant exempts. And I guess that would include Bird Park. So you're dealing with a lot of stuff here. You're dealing with a lot of density also. And with 903 condominiums, you definitely do not want to make them non-conforming, because if something else happens to those parcels, I think the Zoning Board of Appeals is going to be very busy. This article, as it is written now, is costing us a fortune. You heard about the multiple requests of town council over this particular section. On one A&R request by the owner of this lot, of the parcel that is the subject of Mrs. Barros's article, that caused us 3 town council legal opinions. I asked Liz Dennehy to give me a number as to how much we're spending on legal bills for this section, and she said, don't even bother. I'm not even going to bother to calculate. It'd be very difficult, but if you had to say what it is, tell the FinCom it's in the thousands. So we don't want to keep spending this type of money for this type of problem. This needs to be nipped in the bud. So I'm sure that if these potential quick fixes, so to speak, a quick fix, and don't lead to any confusion at town meeting and can be passed relatively quickly, Maybe there's a solution here, I don't know. But if it can't, it'll definitely be a priority with the planning board, after town meeting. And you may see the resolution in the spring. I like the moratorium aspect of it, but, you know, when we did the moratorium of the open space residential development, like Sue mentioned, was a great resolution for it. And why? Because we cut off one section that was in its entirety complete. You're not cutting off a section that it's in its entirety looks complete. There's relationships of that section to other sections. And apparently, as Sarah pointed out, what we did last year, the last spring annual town meeting, what we did with Article 31 even increased the interrelationship. So now we've got to really take a hard look at it. But can a moratorium or a substitute motion that says, you know, this only applies to what is already in existence? We'll find out tomorrow morning.
Thank you. You still have the floor, right, Andrew? I think you still have the floor, right?
I had the floor.
I'm sorry.
But that's all right.
Yeah. Sorry.
I had no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was John the name.
Yep.
Give him a little caffeine
It's John the
next
name.
time.
Go ahead, Andrew.
So I think this is a really important article, and these are really important issues. I've emailed with Jack and Joe and Sarah. I've watched the planning board meeting from last week, and I have a lot of concerns about this article. One of which a lot of you may share with me, and another you may not. So my one concern is confusion. My second concern is intention. So I think a lot of us, including the planning board, have a concern about confusion. That's why they remanded it back. They want to study it. Now, I fully support that. I think getting to the bottom of it, is it going to be kicked back to Section 5, or is it going to be a variance to the Zoning Board of Appeals? All of that, like what parcels it applies to, I'm all in favor of studying it more so that we don't have an Article 31 again. Period. So I'm a little hesitant about a moratorium, but I definitely would support a vote to remand it back to committee. Separate point, my second concern, and this is something that I think is going to take a little time to develop. I don't support this article's intention. And the intention, I believe, and again, I want to say, Ms. Barrows, you have good intentions, but I think the effects of this article are going to be bad for the town's future housing development. This town has an affordable housing problem, right? You hear a lot of complaints about 40B developments. Well, we need more affordable housing if we're going to avoid 40Bs in the future. Affordable housing often means denser housing. Now, I am going to make a pretty free market argument here. If our zoning laws are as currently constructed, forcing a lot of developers to go through a special permit process in Section 6 to build these multiple lots on a single unit, multiple buildings on a single lot, and they're avoiding Section 5 or they're avoiding the zoning board, it's probably because those are less restrictive processes. There's fewer abutters, there's fewer setbacks, all those things that the site plan review, whether you have to go through the subdivision process. To have exclusionary zoning rules that are going to make it harder for developers to build denser housing in the GR zone where denser housing is intended. That's the whole point of this, right? It's going to make our affordable housing problem worse in the future. And so this is a pretty free market argument. If you think that government intervention is bad, why do you want more zoning laws being able to pick winners and losers? Now, I'm all for two things. I think your strongest argument, Joe and Liz, is the litigation cost. If litigation costs are a real issue for the town, then by gosh, we should absolutely get to the bottom of this by studying it and clarifying it, maybe even passing a short moratorium. So I think that's the strongest argument in favor of this article. But however, there's a much bigger cost in litigation, which is the fact that a lot of people can't afford to live here and that we're going to get hit with 40Bs in the future. And so if you don't allow for denser housing, which is what the market's demanding, this is the point. I have to agree with Mr. Hassenjager here. If people, home buyers, are looking for denser homes, maybe condos on a single lot, then let them build condos. So that's my point of why I oppose this.
All right, thank you. I think Mark was next.
Actually, I was going to move for refer back to the planning board. I like the idea of a substitute motion coming forward if town council thinks that the wording can be put together and will be available, but for now, refer back to committee.
Second.
Discussion.
Second.
Discussion? Oh, you can open discussion.
Who seconded?
John did.
John. John.
So maybe refer back to committee.
Oh, go ahead, that's okay, go ahead.
This is on the motion.
Oh, Yes.
okay. Not on the subject.
Me too, go ahead.
I just wanna understand the mechanics here. If we refer it back to committee, what is the impact of a vote in that direction? Are we precluded? There's a certain action that we take that.
They can bring it back at any time possible. If we take no action, it's barred. Actually, zoning articles are not barred, but other articles would be barred for 2 years.
Okay, that was
Yeah.
it. If it's no action.
Right.
It's 2 years.
Right.
Okay, so I just wanna understand what we're voting on. So the motion is to refer it back to committee, meaning
Planning board.
go back to the planning board.
Yep.
And and help me understand why it would be the planning board as opposed to zoning or,
The planning board makes the rules.
They generally go through and do all the zoning bylaw changes. Unless we appoint a separate group.
so, I just
Well,
wanna,
from town meeting.
so which bodies are involved in this? We've got planning board for sure, we got the zoning board of appeals,
Potentially.
and any other,
Building department.
Building department.
building commissioner?
Yep.
But by referring it to planning, the thought would be that that would be the body that could.
Right.
All right, but this would not then establish a moratorium. It would only say we're not gonna take any action, we're referring it back.
Correct. The hope is that legal counsel would come forth with language that a moratorium could be submitted as a substitute motion, but we won't know that sometime tomorrow if it would work.
Ron?
No, I think Mark stole my thunder there. I was trying to say we have to, I hope we get to the proper vote. And in the meantime, I'm not sure who, but somebody has to get to town council to make sure that a moratorium, we can't do that, but,
Right.
but a substitute motion will be within the scope of the article somehow to do that. So I'm not sure if the proper vote for us is remand back to committee or no action, but whatever gets to that point, I'd support that.
So we have a motion seconded, remain back to committee. Mr. Bowen?
Well, I have somewhat of a procedural question then. If we reconsider and vote it, and town council comes back and tells us Monday we can do something else, we can't reconsider a reconsidered thing, so maybe we shouldn't vote on it.
Well, it'd become a substitute motion on the floor.
Okay, but if council comes back and, I'd almost like to see FinCom supporting something on this, cause this is a mess.
But we don't have anything to support.
Yeah, we don't have anything now, but what if town council came back and said you can do this, X, Y, or Z? And we could do it Monday night.
Well, that's
But-
a possibility of.
One thing, I guess, what I was afraid of, the one thing is that the end of whatever we do is not that it just goes back to the planning board and that's the end of it, because whatever happens between now and when they come back, whether it's the spring or next fall, people that come in and get their projects in are gonna be grandfathered under the existing zoning bylaw.
But
We
we're
don't-
hoping for a moratorium, right?
no, yeah,
Yes.
right. So we wanna make sure that town meeting doesn't get the idea that, the end-all and be-all of what we're trying to do is just send it back to the planning board. That wouldn't be too good.
Dick, you had your hand up. Dick? Did you had your hand up, no?
No,
You good?
Can we hear from John?
I'm just nervous to see that town meeting's coming up Monday. You saw what happened last meeting, went on for 3 nights. And believe me, people that have been on the planning board still don't understand it. Joe has a good grasp, he spends a lot of time on it. I don't wanna see us get into another embarrassment or a problem that we can't dig out of. And zoning is crucial.
Your only vote really is remand back to town, remand
Yeah.
back to planning board, because the only way you're gonna get a moratorium or some type of other quick fix is through a substitute motion, especially at this point in time. So whether or not this is all, whether those 2 fixes are legal is gonna have to be carried forth by an RTM member.
And the last thing for Joe, I think with Sarah and Mark, I fully agree with the fact that the planning board should be the proper group to work on this.
Very
Just
good.
just to address what Andrew had to say about the affordable housing. We basically have a committee that handles all of that, but I think it's been maybe defunct for a while, and it needs to be rejuvenated. And that's a committee that's appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and I think that they discussed that at one of their meetings when they were considering either this article or another article. So that's the avenue for that. What we're finding is that a lot of builders who are coming in and doing this dense apartment development want market rates, because the market rates are very high right now. In order to compensate and get affordable housing, you know, where you had maybe 5 or 6 stories in the center of town in the CBD, if you were gonna get more than market rates and get affordable housing, they might have to even go up higher, and that would be higher than, they have to come in under a 40B, because our limit is, what, 60 feet or something, 50-something feet. So, you know, it's like a catch-22. It's like watching a dog chase its own tail, and nothing's getting accomplished. So if the applicants are coming in and you ask them, are you doing affordable, and their answer is no, you know, it becomes an issue here, because you can't twist their arm, as far as I know. There's nothing is in our bylaws that say that. I'd have to look again, but I don't believe so. So things are problematic in that regard. And I don't think anybody wants this type of, while it may be appropriate for the central business district, I know out in the neighborhoods, I'm getting a lot of feedback from people about high density and height limitations, because people don't want high density in their neighborhood, and they don't want to have their neighbor, you know, 40 feet higher than their roof line. So, you know, things are getting pretty, in this real estate market especially, so, you know, it's becoming very problematic.
Thank you, Joe. All right.
I'd like to say something, just since Joe is a member, he's somewhat of an expert, I guess, on this. It doesn't really address the need, as Andrew Flowers said, in the market. And this is kind of, you've got two tailored this has been in the books forever. There's never been a problem. All of a sudden, there's an urgency. There's this big issue. It's got to be fixed tonight. It's been in the book 10 years, and we never had a problem until there was a problem with Burgess Ave. And apparently, that's been resolved one way or the other. Joe had a problem with the Buttimer Farm, and that's how he got involved. A lot of times, the butters get involved when a development or some properties going in their neighborhood, and that's understandable. But that's not a reason to gerrymander the zoning book and throw all these rules out. I would say there's no urgency, and there's no sense of any imminent problem that's some kind of a disease that's taking place everywhere. That's just factually not true. And it's also not true and I think we do need to take into account people that invest in this community. The way we get tax base is by people investing, banks and business people, to build the housing that people need. The developers are people who have babies and children who grow up and want to have a house. Those are what the developers are, the people fulfilling a need who build them for them. They want scale. They want smaller scale. And and I'm not defending this particular project that she's so upset about, but my understanding, those homes are going to be in the 300,000s, which is really a good thing in my view for young families who want to get started in Walpole. It's not a bad thing, and I think they were low profile. I don't know. I'm not, but there's no big catastrophe or urgency like you're saying here, that it has to have a moratorium and shut everything off. That's totally ridiculous.
Point of order.
That's, you know,
Yes, what is your
that's my
point?
opinion. Joe has an
Public hearing has
opinion.
been closed.
We don't
Very good,
attack.
okay, so, I think we had a motion, do we have any more debate on the committee, can we
Yes,
vote
I
on this?
just, John, want to say one more thing on
You
this.
sure?
Just one more.
You sure? Just one?
Pretty sure.
Okay, just one.
Little bit. I like what John Lee said earlier about a moratorium, because I think you don't want to rush headlong into something without really knowing the implications and how it may impact other sections. Having said that, I think that, I feel strongly that I hope we will able to do a moratorium, because that's part and parcel of wanting to just slow the horse down and see what we're dealing with, and not have these developments. My concern is not so much multiple housing and all the rest, is Jack Conroy's point, which stuck with me, is that we need to have clear criteria. As it stands now, it's so ambiguous that it's not clear who gets approval for what. And that always troubles me, not only from an equity point of view, but from a litigation point of view, because it opens the town up to litigation. Whereas if you have a situation where the developer has to go before a body and there's written, clear, unambiguous standards that are applicable, everybody knows what the rules are, and it's applied. So that's my concern, and I think this is the right thing to do right now, is do no action, and then hopefully a town meeting will get a moratorium.
Great.
I'm sorry, you're right, I misspoke.
Okay,
Refer
thank you,
back.
Susan. We're gonna move, we're gonna move, this is, taking quite some time.
Before you vote, I just want to clarify something.
With
The proposed, for people who are concerned about bringing affordable housing, their developer is proposing $650,000 units, so it's not.
It's not.
So, no,
Okay, can we?
I can have a good response to this.
I know, but that's, we don't,
No, I
this
just
is not a
wanted to-
debate
you
about
can-
Burns Ave and the
I
development.
just wanted you to know that that's.
Move the question.
Yes, thank you. Let's, move the question. Do we have, motion,
Is there a second?
So the motion, the motion's on the floor. All those in favor of the motion, please raise their hand.
The motion was to remand back to.
Motion
back
to
to the
remand,
committee.
remand Article 29 back to committee or to the planning board. All
Move
in
the
favor?
question, we never voted that one.
Keep that.
Want to withdraw
All
that?
those opposed?
Unanimous.
Any abstentions? All right. Moving through the rest of the agenda items. There's some correspondence in our package. We have a letter from the economic.
We still have no vote on 5.
What?
Yeah, we did.
Failed vote?
Yeah, we did.
No, we have,
Yeah, yes, it's the failed vote.
it's a failed vote.
The failed vote.
What's your
671.
motion gonna be?
What's that?
What's the motion gonna be?
Well, the motion,
Self-explanatory.
It failed to gain
we're all,
favorable action.
yeah, we're
Jim has-
happy with it. We're good with
Reading
it.
that by council and we got it listed.
We're all
It
set.
still isn't the motion.
The motion, the article failed. 671.
Failed vote is what's on.
Well, Jim has it for $1 million from free cash.
Yep.
But it
And
was,
second
and
vote.
a favorable action failed.
Yeah,
Is
right,
But that is the motion
yes,
that failed.
it failed.
right.
But this is what's going to town meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
There's gonna be a substitute motion.
This is what happens when you leave. I don't think you were there.
All right, so that was correspondence in your package, and then we've got some minutes. I provided comments, I believe, on the 14th. I don't know if anyone else had comments. Did you?
No.
Yeah, you're still working on, okay, so 14th is,
No, they're all done. I mean, you were the only one I heard from.
right, okay.
Yeah, the only other change is to change my spelling.
Mine too. Flowers.
Oh, and his name.
What was the spelling?
Under Article 12 and
Okay.
4, my last name's spelled wrong.
All right, give it to me after.
Yep. And Andrew's got a couple of spelling errors, I guess we'll fix.
All right, so we'll, we conditionally, how do we conditionally approve those? Pending the name correction, or?
Yeah. Move to accept the minutes of September
Thank you.
14th as amended for spelling errors.
Second.
All those in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
I'm gonna abstain.
Any abstains?
I'm abstaining. I wasn't there.
14.
14. September 18th.
Make a motion to accept the minutes from September 18th.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Accepting the minutes September 18th, please say aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No abstentions?
No abstentions. We're almost there. I'm getting hangry.
September 25th.
September 25th.
I'm sorry.
It's in November.
September.
Accept the minutes of September 25th as presented?
Second.
All those in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
1, 2, 3.
Motion adjourned.
Allen,
Favor?
Robert, and
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone. Great job tonight.